Welcome back to Ancient Secrets. Sit back, relax, and don't forget to comment where you're watching from down below. It's amazing seeing people all around the world supporting my small channel. Now enjoy the show. The afternoon sun hangs low over the Nile, drenching the river in molten gold. Warm light dances on the water's surface as a gentle breeze ripples through the reeds along the banks. In the shallows, a chorus of children's laughter erupts. A skinny boy and his sister splash each other, their bronze bodies gleaming with river water. The girl balances on a floating bundle of papyrus stalks, arms outstretched like a bird, squealing in delight as her brother lunges playfully and tips her into the cool blue shallows. They disappear with a splash, then pop up again amid the lily pads, laughing and gasping for breath. Their joyous shouts echo over the water, carrying all the way to a cluster of mud brick houses nestled on the shore. Under the shade of a lone date palm, two farmers pause in their work to watch the children at play. One wipes sweat from his brow and leans on his shovel, a grin softening the lines of his sun-weathered face. The other chuckles, calling out a teasing encouragement to the boy to dunk his sister again. A moment later, the men return to repairing an irrigation channel, but their eyes still sparkle with amusement. Not far away, a fisherman stands knee-deep in the Nile, casting a net and humming a tune under his breath. Each time he glances at the splashing children, the tune picks up in tempo, inspired by their energy. On the riverbank behind him, a woman with a clay jug balanced on her head stops to enjoy the scene. She remembers her own childhood in these waters and smiles before continuing on, the faint sound of her ankle bracelets jingling as she goes. Nearby, beneath a simple reed-roofed porch attached to a mud-brick cottage, a family has gathered in the golden light. An old man with silvered hair sits cross-legged on the ground, peering intently at a grid of squares painted on a slab of wood, the board of an ancient game called senet. Opposite him, his adult son holds a handful of small sticks, shaking them and then tossing them onto the ground as dice. The sticks clatter and the son moves his game piece 2 spaces forward. Immediately the grandfather cackles with glee. With a sly grin, he slides one of his own pieces to block his son's path on the board. The younger man groans in theatrical defeat, and the rest of the family bursts into laughter, mother, siblings, and a giggling toddler balanced on the mother's hip. The grandmother, stirring a pot of lentils over a small cooking fire, shoots the men an amused look and chides, "Don't let him fool you. He's been playing since Pharaoh Joseph's day." This prompts another round of laughter. The air smells of wood smoke and boiling beans, mingling with the sweet scent of ripe dates drying on mats. A scrawny dog naps at their feet, its ears flicking at the sound of its family's mirth. In this sun-drenched slice of afternoon, ancient Egypt is not a land of silent statues or solemn tombs. It is alive with human warmth. Here, along the Nile's edge, life's simple joys reign. We hear it in every splash and every chuckle, a timeless delight in living. It might surprise us, given how much the Egyptians spoke of death and the afterlife, to find them so exuberantly engaged in the pleasures of the here and now. But the people of the Nile Valley believed that life was a gift of the gods, to be cherished and filled with joy. Yes, they built mighty pyramids and prepared their dead for eternity, but they also danced under the stars, sang songs at twilight, played games by lamplight, and savoured the sweet taste of each day. They wanted to live life to its fullest, to experience all that their time on earth had to offer, and they looked forward to carrying those joys into the next world. What did the ancient Egyptians do for fun? Imagine stepping into their world and discovering that answer not through dusty lists of facts, but by living it alongside them. We will wander from the humble courtyards of common folk to the gilded halls of pharaohs, from the hush of twilight story circles to the raucous roar of festival crowds. We'll join children as they play beside the Nile and follow musicians' melodies into candle-lit banquet rooms. We'll witness athletic young men wrestling in the sand for glory and laughter, and feel the pounding drums as dancers twirl in worship of the gods of joy. We will drink and revel under the blazing Egyptian sun during festivals that honoured gods with pure celebration. Through archaeology and art, through the stories they left behind and the echoes of laughter in ancient texts, we will glimpse a culture that wove fun and festivity into the very fabric of existence. Our journey begins in the quiet moments of daily life, the games, stories, and amusements that brightened ordinary days. From there, it will sweep us into the intoxicating revels of grand festivals and public celebrations, where entire cities came alive with music, feasting, and dance. We will peek into elegant, noble gardens where laughter mingled with the perfume of lotus blossoms at sunset, and we'll tiptoe into village squares where common folk gathered to sing and celebrate the simple fact of being alive. As we travel through this world of ancient Egyptian leisure, keep in mind that for these people, fun was never just escapism. It was an affirmation of Ma'at, the divine harmony of the universe. Joy had meaning, music, games, and laughter were threads that tied them to each other, to their gods, and to eternity itself. So find a comfortable seat in the shade. Perhaps imagine a cup of cool date wine in hand. The day is warm and bright, the Nile sparkles invitingly, and somewhere not far off a flute is playing a playful tune. It's time to journey back in time and discover what brought smiles and laughter to the people who lived under the pharaohs, to see the ancient Egyptians at play, their hearts full of life, even in the shadow of the pyramids. As dusk begins to purple the sky, the family's Senate game winds down. The grandfather triumphantly moves his last piece off the board, winning the match. Amid good-natured groans and applause, the wooden pieces are gathered up and the game board set aside. They will surely play again tomorrow night, as they do most evenings. Senet is more than just a pastime to them. It is practically an institution. The game's grid of 30 squares holds a rich symbolism that the family only dimly understands but deeply appreciates. In their language, Senet means the game of passing, and many say it represents the journey of the soul through the dangers of life and into the peace of the afterlife. As the last rays of sunlight filter through the doorway, the grandfather reverently places the board on a shelf beside a small statue of the household gods. He handles it with care, for this board, carved smooth by years of use, might one day be placed in his own tomb, ensuring he has something to do for fun in eternity. Board games were beloved across all of Egypt. From humble labourers to mighty pharaohs, everyone enjoyed a good game. Earlier that day, in a painted palace colonnade catching the midday breeze, 2 elegant women in linen gowns also knelt across a Senet board, mirroring the humble scene in the cottage. One was no less than the queen herself, the favourite wife of Rameses the Great, Queen Nefertari, and in the cool shadows of her garden pavilion she moved her ebony and ivory pieces with the same competitive gleam in her eye as any village elder. Artists later immortalised Nefertari in her tomb painting, shown calmly playing Senet in the afterlife, as if even beyond death she intended to keep having fun. Many pharaohs were buried with finely crafted Senet sets of their own, from cedarwood boards inlaid with gold to simple grids scratched by a workman on a limestone slab for his grave. The message was the same. Life's pleasures were meant to last forever. Indeed, Egyptians hoped that in the field of reeds, their heaven, one could play endless games of senet under blissful blue skies, never growing bored. Senet may have been the most popular game, but it was far from the only one. The Egyptians invented and enjoyed many others. In wealthier circles, for example, they played a game modern people call hounds and jackals, featuring pegs shaped like little dogs and jackals. Players raced their animal-headed pieces along winding tracks of holes on a wooden board, competing to reach the finish first. This game became a fad during the Middle Kingdom. A beautifully preserved set was discovered in a noble's tomb at Thebes, and even the boy king Tutankhamun was buried with an ornate hounds and jackals board by his side. Clearly, even pharaohs relished a bit of friendly competition. Back in our little village home, the children now clamour for a turn at a different pastime. The mother pulls out a curious circular board painted with the spiral of a coiled snake. This game is called mehen, the serpent game. It was ancient even then, an heirloom from the time of the pyramids, said to be the oldest board game in the world. The board's snake coils around to a central goal, and the players race using lion-shaped pieces and tiny marbles. As they play, the father explains the legend behind the game. Each night, the sun god Ra sails through the underworld, threatened by a giant serpent of chaos named Apophis. But Ra is protected by Mehen, the divine snake that coils around him. "See," the father points to the board's painted serpent, "we are like Ra, journeying safely inside the coils. But beware, if Apophis strikes, we must start again." The children's eyes widen at this bit of mythic drama injected into their game. Whether or not this was truly the intended meaning of Mehen, it makes the play exciting. The players throw down their knucklebone dice, hop their lion pieces along the snake's back, and shriek whenever someone's piece is sent back to the tail. For a moment, they are heroes voyaging through the night, outwitting monsters with each lucky roll. In another corner of the room, the grandmother watches the youngsters play Mehen and smiles. In her lap, she holds a carved wooden baboon, a toy that doubles as a figurine of the god Bes, the household deity of laughter, music, and good times. Bes is often depicted as a stout, dwarf-like figure sticking out his tongue and shaking a rattle, scaring off evil spirits and tickling families into smiles. The grandmother runs her thumb over the baboon's polished head thoughtfully. Fun and protection in one, such was the Egyptian way. Setting the figurine aside, she reaches into a wicker basket and pulls out a handful of toys to amuse the restless toddler at her feet. A clay rattle that still makes a cheerful jingle, a stuffed cloth doll with hair made from twisted palm fibres, and a tiny wooden crocodile with a jaw that snaps open and shut when a string is pulled. These simple toys have survived generations, and similar ones have been found by modern archaeologists tucked into tombs. Silent testimony that even a child's playthings were treasured enough to travel into eternity with them. Tonight, the living children pile them up to invent an impromptu game. The toddler hugs the rag doll while the older ones take turns poking at the crocodile, daring each other to pull its string and yelping in mock terror when its wooden jaws clack shut. As darkness falls, an oil lamp is lit, casting a warm flicker over the cosy scene. The day's work is done, and now is the time for stories. The family gathers in a circle, faces illuminated by the dancing flame. Outside, 1,000,000 stars begin to pierce the velvet sky. Inside, imagination is about to take flight. Storytelling is perhaps the Egyptians' favourite entertainment of all, a tradition as old as the Nile. In an age where most people cannot read or write, the spoken word carries the magic of theatre, library, and school all in one. And so, with the children nestled close, the grandfather clears his throat and begins a tale that he heard from his own grandfather years ago. Long ago, during the reign of King Sneferu, the great pyramid builder, he intones, there lived a pharaoh who grew bored and listless, for nothing could make him laugh. The grandfather's voice is low and gravelly, and the children lean in eagerly. He continues, eyes twinkling. So his chief scribe suggested a remedy, to sail in a boat rowed by the most beautiful young women of the palace, 20 maidens with nets for garments, rowing up and down the royal lake. The mother gasps in mock scandal, and the kids giggle, already picturing the scene. And lo and behold, the old man chuckles. The king's heart was glad at the sight, but as the girls rowed, one dropped her green gem into the water and began to weep. King Sneferu could not bear to see her unhappy, so what do you think happened? The oldest boy, familiar with this beloved story, jumps in. The scribe used magic to split the waters and fetch the gem. Yes, the grandfather beams. He describes how the scribe spoke a secret spell. The waters of the lake parted into towering walls, and the precious green jewel lay gleaming on the lake bed. As the gem was returned to the girl, the waters crashed back down, and King Sneferu laughed and laughed, his boredom cured. Around the circle, everyone is smiling at the image of a mighty king finding joy in such a whimsical adventure. Unbeknownst to them, they've essentially heard a 4,000-year-old short story from the Westcar papyrus, a tale that would one day be written on fragile papyrus scrolls and rediscovered by archaeologists millennia later, but tonight it lives only in their voices and minds. Emboldened by the success of his first tale, the grandfather launches into another, this one a ghost story to send delicious shivers down spines. He tells of a prince named Setna who discovered a magic book hidden in a tomb, even after the inhabitants of the tomb begged him not to. Against their warnings, Setna stole it, only to be haunted by a stunning enchantress who lured him with promises of love. With dramatic pauses and a waggle of his eyebrows, the old man describes how Setna gave away all his riches for a single night of passion, even agreeing to kill his own children, only to awaken from the enchantment, standing naked in the street, with his dignity in tatters. The children gasp and giggle at the absurdity and fright of it. And that, concludes the grandfather, is why you don't anger the spirits, or chase after strange women. The adults roar with laughter at his playful moral. They know this story too. It's a favourite in Memphis and carries a wink of a lesson about both greed and lust being punished by the gods. At this point, seeing that some of the younger children look a bit wide-eyed from the spooky tale, the grandmother smiles and decides to end the evening with a gentler story to soothe everyone before bed. In a soft melodic voice, she begins the tale of the shipwrecked sailor, a popular adventure with a hopeful message. She tells of a sailor who was lost at sea, the sole survivor when his ship was swallowed by a sudden storm. Washed up on a mysterious island, the sailor despaired, until he found the island was a paradise of fruits and calm pools, and home to a marvellous being, a gigantic serpent with scales of gold and a beard of pure lapis lazuli. The children's mouths form perfect O's as they imagine the splendid snake. But instead of devouring the sailor, the grandmother recounts, the serpent spoke with a wise, kindly voice. This serpent king of the island listened to the sailor's plight and comforted him, saying it was the will of the gods that he had survived. The serpent even revealed his own sorrow. All his fellow serpents, his family, had been killed by a falling star long ago, and he was now alone on the island. In the flickering lamplight, the family listens raptly as the grandmother describes how the sailor lived on the island for 4 months, befriended by the gentle serpent who taught him that every life is touched by loss, but also by grace. When it was time for the sailor to return home, the serpent loaded his boat with gifts, spices, precious ebony, baboon fur, and rare incense. "You shall reach home in Egypt," the serpent promised, "and you will kiss your wife and see your house again. All this is destiny." True to the serpent's word, a rescue ship appeared. The sailor tried to bring his wonderful friend along, but the serpent chose to remain, vanishing into the waves as the sailor sailed away. He returned to Egypt safely, laden with the serpent's riches, and when he told his tale to the Pharaoh, the king said, "Wise is he who has experienced such things and lived to tell of them." As the grandmother finishes, she assures the children that the sailor lived out his days grateful and content, knowing that a divine hand can guide us through even the darkest storm to safe shores. The family releases a collective breath, smiles replacing any lingering trepidation. This comforting tale of deliverance washes away the eerie thrills of the ghost story and leaves them with a sense of wonder and reassurance. For hours the stories continue, weaving worlds within the humble home. They recount the adventures of heroes like Sinuhe, who fled his homeland and fought for a foreign king, only to yearn for Egypt again. They tell of the shipwrecked sailor's miraculous encounter we just heard. They even swap the latest silly gossip about ghosts in the village. Each story holds a lesson: courage, loyalty, humility, love, and as the night deepens, those lessons settle gently into listening hearts. But more than anything, the stories bring delight. They draw the family together in a shared dream, erasing the hardships of the day. In the flickering lamplight, the wrinkles on the grandmother's face soften as she watches her family enraptured by the old tales. For a little while in these stories they can be anything: princes, warriors, clever peasant girls who outsmart pharaohs, or just travellers seeing the wider world through words. By the time the lamp's oil is nearly spent, the children are nodding off, heads drooping onto their mothers' laps. The last tale trails off, and a satisfied silence fills the hut. The ancient Egyptians have no separate word for our concept of a fictional story. To them, these tales are a natural extension of reality and religion, a way to make sense of the world and also to revel in its mysteries. Tonight, as every night, storytelling has done its job well. It has entertained, educated, and bound the family closer in both laughter and tears, for one of the love stories made the women wipe their eyes surreptitiously. In a culture where papyrus scrolls are precious and literacy a specialized skill, the oral tradition is the people's library of the imagination. Through these tales told under starlight, the Egyptians pass on wisdom and joy from one generation to the next. Finally, the mother coaxes the sleepy children up and off to their straw mats. The family members bid each other good night with gentle smiles. Tomorrow will be another day of toil under the sun, planting, building, baking, ferrying goods. But they know now, as they drift to sleep, that tomorrow evening will bring its own small celebration, perhaps another game, perhaps another story, or a song shared over a cup of beer. This promise of leisure after labour is a comfort as real as the soft glow soon visible on the eastern horizon. In ancient Egypt, every day held moments of joy waiting to be claimed, like flowers that bloom when the work is done. In those precious hours of play and storytelling, they affirmed what they cherished most: life itself, here and now, sweet and irrepressible. Meanwhile, across the river in the estate of a wealthy noble, night has fallen, but the festivities are only just beginning. Flame-lit torches crackle in the gardens, throwing playful shadows across rows of date palms and blooming lotus pools. Servants bustle about, laying out platters of roast duck, figs and bread on low tables, and refilling elegant alabaster cups with sweet wine. High-pitched laughter and the murmur of conversation drift from a grand open pavilion decorated with flowery garlands. Here, under a ceiling painted with stars, Egypt's elite recline on plush cushions, dressed in their finest linen. Men wear crisp white kilts pleated to perfection, and women glide in flowing semi-transparent gowns that cling softly to their forms. Almost every guest, man and woman alike, sports a perfumed wax cone atop their wig or braided hair. As the warmth of the gathering continues, these cones slowly melt, releasing waves of fragrance, the rich scent of myrrh, lotus blossom and cinnamon that mix with the night air. The aroma is heady and luxurious, befitting the opulence of the scene. At a signal from the host, the entertainment commences. A troupe of musicians enters and bows, young men and women carrying harps and lyres, lutes and flutes, hand drums and ivory clappers. They begin to play a lively tune. The harpist draws his fingers across the taut strings, producing a shimmering cascade of notes. A flutist trills a melody as sweet as birdsong over a steady, hypnotic beat of drums. Immediately the conversation hushes and all eyes turn to the centre of the pavilion. There, two dancers appear, moving with sinuous grace. They are barely clothed, wearing only glittering collars at their throats and jewelled belts hung with beads that sway and shimmer with each movement. Their skin glistens with perfumed oil under the torchlight. As the music builds, the dancers twirl and bend acrobatically. They arch backwards until their hands touch the floor, then flip gracefully to their feet, eliciting gasps of delight from the audience. The beads of their belts click softly with each gyration of their hips. One dancer balances on her toes, arms undulating like a river reed in the breeze, while the other performs a series of flips and cartwheels, her jewels flashing. Cheers and claps erupt from the nobles. Even the dignified high priest can't help but grin in amazement. The mood is infectious. Servants carrying wine pause to tap their feet. Some guests begin clapping along to the rhythm, while others snap their fingers or ululate sharp trills of encouragement. The pavilion fills with an atmosphere of pure joy, hierarchies momentarily forgotten in the shared enjoyment of music and motion. A few tipsy guests rise from their couches and join a spontaneous line dance, laughing as they mimic the professionals' moves with far less grace. The lead harpist smiles and seamlessly transitions the music into a well-known folk tune that everyone knows. Suddenly the whole party is singing, a cheerful chorus praising the goddess Hathor, patroness of love, beauty, and merriment. "Joy, O Hathor, fill our hearts," they sing, raising their drinks in salute. Hathor's presence is almost tangible tonight. After all, she is often called Mistress of Jubilation, and it is said she and her entourage of musicians reside in every hall where music and laughter flow. In the corner of the pavilion, an elderly blind harpist sits plucking at a smaller harp, preparing for the next set. He begins a more soulful melody, and the party gradually quiets to listen. His fingers dance over the strings as he sings a song of the harper, those ancient verses that remind everyone to embrace the moment. His voice is raspy but rich with emotion. "Follow your heart as long as you live. Put incense on your head and garlands around your neck. Dance and make merry. Do not weary of it." Some guests nod along solemnly. These words come from the wisdom of their ancestors, inscribed in tombs, yet alive in music. Even at a revel, the Egyptians savour a touch of poetry and philosophy intermingled with pleasure. When the harpist finishes, a respectful silence follows, then warm applause. A noblewoman dabs at a tear, perhaps thinking of a loved one departed, but then raises her cup and toasts to this life and the next. Moments later, the mood bounces back to merriment. A group of servant girls brings out new jugs of beer and wine, while others hand each guest a fresh lotus flower. The attendees inhale the bloom's sweet perfume deeply, a traditional gesture meant to put the lotus to the nose, an encouragement to enjoy the bounty of life. Inhibitions melt away like the aromatic wax cones on their heads. The noble host, cheeks flushed with drink, stands and claps in rhythm as the musicians strike up a boisterous dance tune. "Come, friends," he calls. "Tonight we are all as young as these dancers. Let's join them." And so begins the second act of entertainment. Guests themselves forming a dancing circle. They laugh at each other's clumsy attempts to mirror the elegant performers, but no one minds the silliness. A respectable scribe twirls with surprising agility, drawing cheers. A tipsy court official attempts a daring high kick, stumbles and collapses into laughter on the cushioned floor, much to everyone's amusement. Two ladies of the court link arms and spin like schoolgirls, their peals of laughter ringing out into the warm night. This lavish banquet is a world apart from the quiet village evening, yet in many ways it is driven by the same spirit of communal enjoyment. Music and dance are not luxuries reserved for the rich. They are woven through the fabric of Egyptian life at every level. On a simpler night in a riverside tavern, for instance, a few fishermen might gather after a long day, sharing a ceramic jug of barley beer. One produces a battered lute, its single string plucked in a catchy, repeating rhythm, while another keeps time with a clap or by drumming on an upturned pottery jar. Soon they are singing a rowdy worker's song, full of cheeky humour about their overseer's bald head, and a verse or two praising Hathor's golden ale. The tavern echoes with hearty laughter as more voices join the chorus, and for a time these labourers feel like kings of their own little world. Even at the modest hearths of farmers, husbands and wives might hum a tune together as they grind grain, or a mother might sing a soft lullaby about the sky goddess, Nut, spreading her protective wings over her child. From cradle to grave, music accompanies the Egyptians. It is there in the fields as men chant to coordinate their hoe strokes, and in the temples where priests shake sacred sistra, ritual rattles, before the statues of the gods. It resounds in the workshops where craftsmen tap out rhythms as they chisel stone, and in the marching beat of soldiers training with their bows. But it is at times of celebration that music and dance truly shine. Whether a humble birthday gathering or the opulent feast of a high lord, no party is complete without melody and movement. The Egyptians, with their keen appreciation for balance and beauty, consider music a divine gift, an echo of the harmonious order Ma'at that governs the universe. They even have deities devoted to these arts, Hathor, as mentioned, and also Bez, the jovial dwarf god who dances and claps to ward off evil and bring joy to households. In painted scenes on tomb walls, we see lively depictions of banquets with guests smelling lotus flowers, musicians playing flutes and harps, and young dancers captured in mid-twirl, limbs at impossible angles in feats of flexibility. These images are not fantasies, they are records of cherished moments from real life, intended to ensure that the deceased will have just as fine a time in eternity. Even the pharaohs themselves were not immune to the allure of a captivating performance. One famous account from the Old Kingdom tells of a dancing dwarf brought from the lands far to the south as a special entertainer for the court. The young king Pepi II, upon hearing that his expedition had found such a marvel, wrote a delighted letter to his governor Harkhuf, urging him to hurry back with the dwarf. He commanded that the little dancer be kept safe and comfortable, and that no one is to allow him to fall into the Nile, in transit, so eager was the boy king to see the dwarfs' divine dance at the royal court. When at last this exotic performer arrived, it's said that he danced in the palace before the pharaoh and his nobles, sparking uproarious laughter and amazement. The Egyptians considered dwarfs to be under the protection of the gods. Indeed, Bes, the god of home and fun, was often depicted as a dwarf, and a talented pygmy dancer from the ends of the earth was seen as a harbinger of joy and good fortune. One can imagine the scene, the little man capering nimbly to music, the child pharaoh clapping his hands in glee, and the entire court enchanted by the novelty and exuberance of the moment. For a culture that treasured both the familiar rhythms of life and the occasional wondrous surprise, this was entertainment at its finest. Back at the nobleman's pavilion, the festivities begin to mellow as midnight approaches. The dancers have taken their bows and retired, and the musicians now play a slow, dreamy tune to wind the evening down. A few guests snooze gently in their seats, spent from dancing and drink, while others sit in small groups, talking softly about the performances or complimenting the host on his excellent wine. A portly noble is still humming the refrain of the harper's song under his breath while picking at the last sweet dates on a platter. Finally, as a silvery crescent moon rises high above the palm trees, the partygoers gather their things and prepare to depart. Servants extinguish most of the torches, leaving the pavilion bathed in soft shadows and moonlight. The host, still exuberant, stands at the gate to personally thank each guest with a warm embrace or a kiss on both cheeks, a custom among close friends. "May we meet again in joy," he says sincerely to each as they step into their waiting ox-drawn chariots or donkey carts for the ride home. The night air is filled with the sound of farewell laughter and the receding jingles of harness bells. In the silence that follows, one can almost hear the garden itself sigh with contentment, as if even the statues of gods and ancestors around the pavilion smile at the memory of the merriment that took place. Tonight has been a success, another victory for life's simple happiness in the face of life's many uncertainties. Tomorrow the noble and his peers will resume the burdens of managing estates, scribes will return to their scrolls, and priests to their rituals. But tonight they have lived fully, believing, as all Egyptians do, that the gods delight in human joy as much as in piety. The echoes of music and laughter linger on the midnight breeze, eventually carrying across the Nile to mingle with the dreams of farmers asleep in their huts, tying together the two halves of Egypt's world, rich and poor, in that shared sacred experience of having fun. The cycle of seasons in Egypt is punctuated by festivals, bright flowers of celebration that bloom in the midst of everyday life. Every town and every god has special days when normal routines pause and the world turns upside down in joy. On these occasions, the Egyptians don their best, cast their worries aside, and partake in collective revelry that can be as solemn or as wild as the spirit of the day demands. In the great city of Thebes, capital of the new kingdom, the Opet festival transforms the streets into a grand carnival. The air quivers with anticipation from early morning. Market stalls close down, and instead vendors line the procession route, selling honey cakes and beer to revelers gathering in the sun. Families stake out a good spot along the avenue of sphinxes that connects the temple of Karnak to the temple of Luxor. Children dangle their feet from perched positions on fathers' shoulders, eyes wide and excited. Finally, a distant boom of drums announces the start of the procession. Trumpets blare and an exultant cheer rises from the crowd as the ornate bark of the god Amun emerges from Karnak's massive gates, hoisted on the shoulders of dozens of priests. The golden shrine on the bark glitters, sheltering the hidden statue of the god. Behind follow the barks of Mut and Khonsu, the other two deities of the Theban triad, equally splendid. As the holy boats move slowly forward, shaded by ostrich feather fans, the people bow their heads in respect, but also crane to catch a glimpse, tossing handfuls of flowers in their path. A troupe of musicians precedes the procession, drummers pounding a deep, steady rhythm, men blowing long straight trumpets that blare triumphantly, and women shaking sistra, filling the air with a chaotic jingle. Young girls in flowing white dresses dance alongside, twirling and scattering petals, embodying joy. Spectators join in spontaneously. An old woman ululates with all her might as Amun's bark passes, tears of devotion in her eyes. A group of youths breaks into a clapping dance at the tail of the parade, laughing as a priest winks at them from behind a censer of incense. The whole city seems to pulsate with spiritual jubilation. For the next several days, Opet in Thebes could last over 2 weeks, Thebes is in festival mode. After the grand procession to Luxor Temple, where the statues of the gods will reside for a short while, bestowing blessings, the formal religious part gives way to public celebration. The evenings see the city aglow with oil lamps as families feast outdoors. The Nile sparkles with flickering reflections of hundreds of small boats carrying merrymakers who sing and drum long into the night. On one boat, a teenage boy strums a lute and improvises a humorous song about Amun going on holiday from Karnak to Luxor. His companions roar with laughter at the cheeky, irreverent lyrics. On the riverbanks, countless couples stroll under the palms, wearing garlands of lotus around their necks, taking the chance to flirt and celebrate love under the eye of Hathor, who surely smiles on festival romance. The sweet smell of grilling meat, a rarity in daily meals, wafts through the streets, as even poorer families splurge on a goat or some ducks to roast in honour of the gods' generosity. For many common Egyptians, these festivals are the rare times they taste rich foods or feel truly equal in merriment to their wealthier compatriots. At least during Opet, everyone feasts. Across Egypt, different festivals carry their own flavour. In farming villages, for example, when the Nile's inundation begins each year, communities host local feasts thanking Hapi, the river god, for his bounty. After making offerings at the small shrine by the riverbank, wreathing it with green reeds and fresh vegetables, villagers hold boat races and fishing contests, then drink well into the night to celebrate the promise of another fertile year. But perhaps no celebration in the land can quite match the sheer intoxicating frenzy of the festival of Bastet at Bubastis. It is late summer, and the delta town of Bubastis is positively overflowing with pilgrims. They have come by the boatload from all corners of Egypt to honour the cat goddess Bastet in her yearly festival, an event so famous that even foreigners speak of it in awe. Days before the main celebration, the Nile is jammed with traffic heading northward. An eyewitness, the Greek traveller Herodotus in fact, described how men and women crowded onto barges, bringing food, wine and musical instruments, turning the journey itself into a floating party. As each festive boat sails past riverside villages, the women on board shake rattles and play flutes, while the men and the rest of the women sing and clap their hands in time. Whenever they draw near a town, the revellers bring their boat into shore and shout good-natured mockery at the local women, who shout right back and join the dancing, or sometimes cheekily lift their skirts to the delight of all. In this uninhibited atmosphere, even decorous matronly types might wink and flash a bit of skin, a shocking gesture on any other day. But during Bastet's festival, the goddess's playful spirit takes hold and women are freed from all constraints. What ensues on the Nile is a kind of nautically born parade of mirth and mischief, a grand prelude to the real party awaiting at Bubastis. By the time these revelers arrive, Bubastis itself is in full revel mode. The city's normally modest streets are unrecognisable. Every spare wall and pole is festooned with garlands of flowers and strings of shiny copper amulets shaped like cats. Stalls sell grilled fish, pomegranates, and beer by the gallon. The devotees of Bastet believe the goddess loves music and joy, so nothing is done by half measures. From every corner comes the beat of drums, the rattle of sistra, and the chorus of flutes. Pilgrims pour through the gates of Bastet's temple, which stands on an island in the middle of the city, reachable by bridges that now teem with visitors. Inside, priests are performing the sacred rites, offering bowls of milk and burning frankincense to the lioness lady of the shrine. But outside on the temple grounds, a giant festival fair is underway. The wine flows freely. In fact, as Herodotus noted with amazement, more wine is consumed during Bastet's feast than in all the rest of the year combined. You can smell it in the air, the sharp, fruity scent of red wine splashed in celebration, and the yeasty tang of beer overflowing from clay jugs. Here a group of young men sit in a circle, challenging each other to drinking games. There a cluster of women dance with wild abandon, their hair loose and crowned with blossoms, as an old man plays a joyous tune on a lyre. Everywhere people are shouting praises to Bastet, toasting her with each cup. Joy, O Bastet! Hail to the Lady of Cats! Even those who have collapsed in giggling heaps from too much drink do so with a smile, believing that becoming drunk and merry honours the goddess today. Amid the throngs, one spectacle draws particular attention. A procession of women devotees of Bastet snakes through the city, and these women have cast aside all ordinary propriety. They dance in nothing but short kilts, tied at the waist, their limbs bare and golden in the sunlight. As they pass through the marketplaces, they clash cymbals and beat drums, singing ecstatically to the goddess. Onlookers, men, women, and children, line the road clapping to the beat. Suddenly one of the dancing women lets out a piercing whoop and leaps onto a low wall. With a grin, she pulls up her skirt and flashes the crowd, who explode into whoops of laughter and applause. Far from offence, this is taken as a tribute to Bastet's uninhibited spirit. Mothers shield younger children's eyes with feigned disapproval, but even they are laughing. During Bastet's festival, inhibitions are shed like an old snakeskin. It is a time of catharsis and communal giddiness. As afternoon turns to night, the festival reaches its peak. Huge bonfires are lit along the riverbanks at Bubastis. The flames cast dancing shadows as musicians pick up the tempo even more. Groups of friends link arms and perform the Bastet dance, a frenzied stomping circle dance said to mimic a cat chasing its tail. Laughter peals out into the darkness. Some particularly devoted or particularly inebriated souls wade into the Nile shallows, splashing and singing to the stars. The moon rises, glowing silver, and in its light, the entire city of Bubastis heaves and sways like one living being intoxicated with delight. An observer might describe it as chaos, and indeed perhaps the spirit of Set, the trickster, has a small place even in Bastet's rites, but beneath it all is a profound sense of community and catharsis. People who were strangers in the morning now dance arm in arm as dear friends. Grudges and social distinctions melt away. A beggar shares a drink with a nobleman, and they slap each other on the back after a bawdy joke, both howling with mirth. In the temple sanctuary, the statue of Bastet sits serenely, receiving the prayers and thanks of the occasional worshipper who staggers in to light a candle. But one imagines the goddess herself is out here in the streets, in the drumbeat and the wine and the laughter, her divine spirit diffused among her people, urging them to enjoy the gift of being alive. Not all festivals in Egypt are as unrestrained as Bastet's carnival. There are more solemn feasts laden with the perfume of religious mystery, like the Osiris Mysteries at Abydos, where priests enact the death and resurrection of Osiris in passion, plays that make spectators quietly weep and hope for renewed life. There are family-oriented celebrations, like the beautiful Feast of the Valley in Thebes, where each year the living commune with their beloved dead. On that night, families cross the Nile to the western bank carrying garlands and lanterns. They picnic at the tombs of their ancestors, laying out bread, beer and flowers at the entrances, calling out lovingly to the spirits, "Come, partake and be happy with us tonight." The necropolis hills glow with hundreds of oil lamps as dusk falls, looking from afar like a galaxy of stars blanketing the desert. Songs drift through the cool night air, tender hymns of remembrance and cheerful ditties alike, as the barriers between past and present, living and dead, dissolve in shared celebration. Children doze on their grandmothers' laps outside the tombs after too many fig cakes. Old friends, long separated, reunite each year on this night among the tombs to embrace, pour libations, and tell stories of those who have passed on. It is peaceful, poignant, and somehow joyous, an affirmation that the love of family endures across the boundary of death. When the first light of dawn pinkens the cliffs, the families gather up their empty baskets and say farewell to the ghosts with hopeful voices. Until next year. They return home with hearts comforted and oddly light, feeling that their ancestors have truly heard them and shared in the feast. Between the extremes of solemnity and wild abandon, most Egyptian festivals mix piety with plenty of party. Take the feast of Hathor at Dendera. During the day, rites of music and offering are performed in Hathor's great columned temple, priestesses shaking sistra and chanting praises to the Lady of Jubilation. But at night, the temple gates are open to the populace, and a different sort of ritual unfolds, the Festival of Drunkenness. This event commemorates a mythic time when humanity was saved by beer, when Ra appeased the bloodthirsty lioness Sekhmet by tricking her into drinking herself into a stupor, transforming her into the gentle Hathor. To honour that salvation, the Egyptians at Dendera drink themselves into a holy stupor. As darkness cloaks the temple courtyard, hundreds of lamps flicker from the walls and shrines. Worshippers, from high-born ladies to humble farmers who've travelled for the occasion, gather with cups of a special reddish beer, brewed strong and spiced with pomegranate juice. The priests lead a rousing hymn to Hathor. "O Golden One, pour forth your music and your love." The crowd repeats the verses, taking swig after swig of the potent brew each time Hathor's name is sung. Soon feet begin to stumble and giggles erupt unbidden. Some devotees dance unsteadily, arms thrown around each other. Others sit against the temple pillars, silly grins on their faces as they watch the sky swirl. Many are so overcome that they slump to the ground one by one, joining a patchwork of snoozing revellers across the courtyard, snoring in offering to the goddess. It is said that in this state of abandon, minds empty, bodies loose, they are closest to the divine. The priests quietly move among them, making sure none are in distress, covering a few with blankets. In the morning, as the sun's rays peek over the walls, the groggy participants awaken to the soothing sound of harps. Dates and bread are distributed to break their fast and ease their pounding heads. There is a gentle reverence in the air. Many report having had blessed dreams in the night, encounters with Hathor or visions of the world's creation. Whether true or simply hazy memories of inebriation, All agree it was the goddess's way of communing with them. They depart Dendera with hangovers and hearts full of the goddess's love, feeling cleansed of sorrow, an annual spiritual rejuvenation through revelry. As these examples show, the Egyptians' festivals were a kaleidoscope of human feeling. Some were wild street parties, others dignified processions or intimate vigils, but all were eagerly anticipated breaks from routine. They provided the average person with a taste of the extraordinary, a few days to live on a higher octave, so to speak. Work halted, societal rules relaxed, sometimes almost inverted, and people of all classes came together in common purpose, to honour life and the gods with celebration. The Egyptian calendar was crowded with such occasions. Every deity's birthday was observed. Great victories or coronations were commemorated annually. There were seasonal feasts for harvest, planting, and Nile flooding. There were national festivals and local village fairs. Through them all, the Egyptians affirmed a deep principle of their culture, that joy and sanctity were two sides of the same coin. In giving themselves over to delight, whether through music, dance, intoxication, or communal feasting, they believed they were also giving thanks to the divine forces that made joy possible. By the time the last festival of the year passes, perhaps a lesser-known one honouring Min or Khnum, the people are already looking forward to the cycle beginning anew. Life can be hard in the Nile Valley. The sun can be harsh, the work backbreaking, the spectre of sickness and death never far. But a festival on the horizon is like a beacon, a promise that the gods see your toil and will reward it with days of happiness. So, when an Egyptian farmer marks his calendar for the next feast of Hathor, or an artisan counts the moons until the next Wag festival, honouring the dead, they are really counting the heartbeats that sustain their spirit through everyday trials. In each celebration they find not only fun but meaning, a reassurance that the cosmic order wants them to enjoy the sweetness of existence. And so the festivals continue year after year, era after era. Herodotus wrote with astonishment of the throngs at Bubastis. Egyptian texts themselves speak fondly of going down to the river on festival day, or singing to my lady Hathor in Jubilee. Across millennia, the notes of their flutes and the echoes of their laughter seem to still linger in those ancient temples and along the Nile's banks. One can almost imagine that on quiet nights in modern Egypt, if you listen carefully by certain ruins, you might catch the faint, distant echo of a sistrum's shake or a celebrant's song carried by the desert wind, ghostly reminders of the days when the land of the pharaohs came alive with pure fun in honour of the gods. In a grand townhouse in Memphis, a wealthy noblewoman begins her day of leisure with a ritual of beauty. The morning sun filters through mashrabiyah screens, painting patterns on the limestone floor of her boudoir. Servant girls hurry about, preparing her toilette. Steam rises from a large ceramic basin filled with warm water and scented oils of lotus and myrrh. The lady, a graceful figure in her 30s, steps into the bath and sighs as the perfumed water envelops her. This is her time. She closes her eyes, letting the worries of managing a household dissolve like the beads of fragrant oil in the water. Two maids gently scrub her skin with soft cloths dipped in natron salt, exfoliating and cleansing. Another massages her shoulders and scalp. The noblewoman hums in contentment. Bathing isn't merely about cleanliness here, it's a cherished daily indulgence. After her bath, she reclines on a cushioned chair while the servants towel her dry and anoint her body with rich incense-infused oils. In the arid Egyptian climate, skin can crack and hair can dry, but the oils keep her skin supple and glowing. She enjoys the sensation as a girl rubs the sweet almond oil into her arms and legs. It's like a mini spa treatment, centuries before the term exists. The room fills with the gentle aroma of frankincense and lilies. On a polished cedar table nearby lies her makeup palette, carved from alabaster, little pots of finely ground malachite, green and galena black, red ochre, and a mirror of bronze polished to a high sheen. With practiced hands, one maid dips a tiny ivory applicator into a paste of powdered black coal and sycamore gum, then applies it to the lady's eyelids in a dramatic line that sweeps outward. The noblewoman watches in the mirror as her eyes transform, outlined bold and almond-shaped like those of the goddess Hathor. Not only is it beautiful, it will protect her eyes from the sun's glare during the day, an ancient version of eyeliner doubling as sunblock. Next, a touch of malachite green shadow is brushed onto her lids for shimmer. Another maid takes a delicate stick and rouges the lady's lips with red ochre mixed in oil, giving them a lush bloom as if from biting into berries. Finally, a cone of perfumed wax, today scented with jasmine, is placed atop her dark wig. As it slowly melts throughout the day, it will release perfume into her hair, surrounding her with a personal cloud of fragrance. Adorning herself does not end with cosmetics. The noblewoman opens an inlaid jewellery box and fingers through her treasures, deciding what to wear. Should it be the broad faience collar necklace with beads in every colour of turquoise, lapis and carnelian, or perhaps the elegant gold pendant depicting the lioness Sekhmet, which was a gift from her husband? She smiles and chooses the faience collar. Its cheerful blues and greens match her uplifted mood this morning. Servants clasp it around her neck. It covers her chest and shoulders like a beaded cape, tinkling softly when she moves. She adds bangles of gold and ivory to her wrists and ankles, each one chiming subtly as she walks. Before she rises, she slides several rings onto her fingers. One bears her name in hieroglyphs. Another is shaped like a coiled cobra. Each piece of jewellery holds meaning: protection, status, or a connection to a deity. But beyond that, they bring her joy in their beauty and shine. As she stands, fully dressed in a freshly pleated linen gown, white as morning light, she takes a final appraising look in the bronze mirror. The face gazing back, with its painted eyes and serene smile, pleases her. She feels confident, rejuvenated, even a touch divine, for in adorning herself she has imitated the images of the goddesses. Personal grooming is an art here, one that Egyptians of means raise to sumptuous heights. The noblewoman spends the next hour or two simply enjoying the morning, nibbling on dates and pomegranates, brought by a servant, lounging on a chaise in her private garden courtyard, listening to the cooing of doves. Her pet monkey, a little green primate with a penchant for mischief, scampers up and tries to snatch one of her bracelets, thinking it a toy. She laughs, a tinkling sound not unlike her jewellery, and playfully bats the creature away, offering it a fig to keep it occupied. Many in the elite keep exotic pets: monkeys, gazelles, peacocks, even the occasional young cheetah, not only as status symbols, but because they delight in these animals' antics. Watching her monkey now somersault as it peels the fig, the lady of the house claps her hands in amusement. It will be a pleasant day. Meanwhile, in a more modest home across town, another Egyptian woman tends to her own morning routine. She is a baker's wife, and though she cannot afford the luxury of long baths and personal attendance, she too relishes the little moments of self-care. After hauling water from the well for her family, she takes a spare pitcher and pours some over herself in their enclosed courtyard, shivering slightly as the cool water washes away the sweat of the already warm morning. She rubs her skin briskly with a scrap of linen. Soap is expensive, but a bit of natron salt from the kitchen helps scour away dirt. Feeling refreshed, she dries off and reaches for her coal pot. Using a tiny wooden stick, she applies the familiar black paint to her eyelids. In the reflective surface of a simple copper mirror, her tired eyes suddenly look larger, more awake. She smiles. The baker's wife then takes a pinch of crushed rosemary and rubs it behind her ears, a homemade touch of perfume to ward off any sour, doughy smells that cling after a night of baking. She owns a single perfume cone, acquired last festival. She saves it for special days. Today she settles for a dab of scented oil from a clay vial, patting it onto her neck. Over her simple linen dress she ties a colourful woven belt that she herself embroidered with bright blue patterns. And from a wooden peg on the wall she lifts her prize piece of jewellery, a necklace of roughly cut turquoise blue faience beads with a little copper cat amulet dangling at the centre. It's not gold, but to her it's beautiful. The amulet of Bastet makes her feel protected and feminine. As she dons it, she feels a small lift in her heart, a moment of pride and happiness that she too can present her best self to the world. Even the working classes indulge in grooming when they can. At the river earlier dawn, a group of field hands took turns dunking in the shallows to wash off the mud of the fields, laughing and splashing like children. They scraped their bodies with coarse cloths, cleaning off sweat then dried in the rising sun. One young farmhand carefully shaved his face with a bronze razor. It's a festival day later, and he wants to look tidy. His friend braids a fresh reed band to wear as a headband, tucking in a white lotus he picked by the water's edge. Another uses a little leftover coal borrowed from his sister to line his eyes, chuckling as his comrades tease him, but secretly they all agree it makes his eyes stand out handsomely. Clean, groomed and joking with each other, they head off to work feeling more human, more alive. What becomes clear is that personal appearance is a source of enjoyment and expression at every level of Egyptian society. In a world without mirrors on every wall, catching one's reflection in a still pool or a polished piece of metal is a small thrill. Am I as radiant as I feel, they wonder? For the noblewoman, looking exquisite, is part of her social duty and personal delight. For the commoner, a bit of beauty is a treat snatched from a life of labour. Both find comfort and confidence in their self-adornment. The cosmetics not only beautify, but often carry protective or medicinal qualities. The kohl guards against eye infections and sun glare. The henna on fingertips cools and hardens nails. So one can feel both safer and more alluring at once. Egyptian men too appreciate the art of presentation. Most keep their hair cropped short or their heads shaved, a practical choice in the heat and against lice, but many own wigs for special occasions, perhaps not human hair like the wealthy, but woven of wool or palm fibre. A young scribe getting ready for a New Year's banquet might carefully perfume his wig with a bit of incense smoke, slip into a freshly laundered linen tunic, and place a cone of scented fat on top, just as the highborn do, so that as he dances later the melting aroma will mark him as a gentleman of refinement. He may even dust a little powdered ochre on his cheeks to give himself a healthy flush and outline his eyes with kohl to appear more distinguished. Checking his look in a brass mirror, he stands a little taller, ready to mingle with confidence, feeling his best self. Beyond the individual, grooming and fashion also have a communal aspect. Friends and family often help each other. Mothers paint their daughters' eyes, wives trim their husbands' hair. In open-air barbershops along city streets, men sit on stools having their heads shaved and beards trimmed by professionals who chat and gossip, creating a social hub as much as a service. Women gather to wash clothes in the river and may end up comparing hairstyles or trading homemade cosmetics, like a particularly nice batch of scented pomade or a new mixture of clay and ochre that works well as rouge. These are moments of social bonding, small pleasures shared in the midst of chores. And of course, fashion in Egypt is not complete without mention of clothing, however simple it may seem. The styles are relatively unchanging, linens wrapped and draped in clever ways, from the basic kilt of a labourer to the pleated gowns of nobility. But within that sameness lies room for creative expression. Wealthier folks dye their linens in saffron yellows, indigo blues, or madder reds for festive attire, or weave patterns of geometric designs at the edges. Even the poor sometimes tie-dye a scrap of cloth or add a fringe to personalise their attire. Footwear, when worn, ranges from plain woven reed sandals to those of fine leather tooled with patterns, a bit of swagger in each step. And nothing stops an Egyptian from carrying themselves like royalty if they feel good. There is an oft-carved scene of an elegantly dressed noblewoman giving a perfumed lotus to her maid, but likewise one can imagine a humble girl tucking a simple flower in her hair and walking with the same grace down a village lane. In these small daily rituals, the application of makeup, the choosing of an accessory, the bathing of one's dusty body, the ancient Egyptians find a sense of control and joy. It is a world where fate and gods loom large, but one's own self is a canvas that can be adorned and celebrated. The mirror, be it bronze or just a clear puddle, offers a moment of dialogue with oneself. You are alive, you are here, and you are beautiful in the eyes of the gods. Every morning that this message is affirmed through the act of grooming is, in its own way, a celebration of life. By midday, our Memphis noblewoman has moved from her boudoir to her garden pavilion, feeling fresh and lovely. She picks up a lute and idly strums a few notes. Yes, she practices music too as a pastime, while her monkey chatters along. Across town, the baker's wife, having finished her chores, sits with neighbours under a shade tree, braiding her friend's hair in an intricate pattern, while another woman tells a funny story. They chew on mint leaves, nature's breath freshener, and occasionally compliment each other's handiwork. "Those braids make you look like a queen, Henut." In moments like these, one sees clearly that leisure is not only in grand festivals or games, but also in the gentle acts of self-care and camaraderie. In caring for their bodies and enjoying adornment, the ancient Egyptians are saying yes to life each day, affirming that to live is not just to toil and pray, but also to delight in one's own existence, to feel clean, whole, and pleasing, as if part of the beautiful order of the world. As we draw the threads of this journey together, a picture emerges of a culture where joy was not a mere diversion from life, it was an integral part of life's meaning. The ancient Egyptians lived in a world of stark dualities, fertile black earth and barren desert, day and night, order and chaos, life and death. Central to their worldview was the principle of Ma'at, the divine balance of the universe. We often think of Ma'at in terms of justice, truth, and duty, but it also encompassed a balance in one's own spirit. To live in accordance with Ma'at was to live a balanced life, one that certainly involved piety and hard work, but equally allowed for laughter, love, and play. They saw no contradiction between the sacred and the silly. In fact, they intertwined them. A hymn to Amun could be sung earnestly in the morning, and by evening that same devotee might be singing a drinking song with friends, and both, in their proper time, honoured the gods. It was the Egyptians who famously said, "Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die," long before similar words were uttered in Rome or anywhere else. In the harper's song inscribed on tomb walls, a blind bard advises, "Follow your heart as long as you live, heap up your joys, let your heart not sink, make holiday, do not weary of it. Lo, None is allowed to take his goods with him. Lo, none who departs comes back again. These were not the words of a rogue hedonist, but of respected sages, encouraging people to embrace life's pleasures because tomorrow is never guaranteed. The Egyptians valued life so greatly that they wished it to continue forever, and in their vision of eternity, the best of life's delights would carry on. They spent their lives preparing for death, yes, but just as fervently they spent their days celebrating being alive. If one wanders through an Egyptian tomb or temple today, one might be struck by how many scenes show people at leisure. Nobles feasting, couples smelling lotus blossoms, people playing music and dancing, farmers relaxing under shade trees with jugs of beer. These are not trivial vignettes. They were central to how the Egyptians conceived of paradise. One's heaven was essentially the continuation of one's happiest moments on earth. They placed board games, musical instruments, cosmetics, and toys in their tombs so that the departed could enjoy themselves in the afterlife, just as they had in life. An ancient inscription in a tomb in Thebes reads, "May I walk every day unceasingly on the banks of the Nile, my soul at peace, seeing fish in the stream and fowl in the marsh, and may I dance to the harp in the land of eternity." That heartfelt wish sums it up. For the Egyptians, fun and fulfillment were not separate from the sacred, but a pathway to it. On any given day in ancient Egypt, you might find a farmer humming a tune as he guides his oxen, looking forward to a beer with comrades at sundown. You might see a priestess of Hathor teaching young girls a graceful new dance for the next festival. Perhaps you'd spy a group of boys in a village square, knucklebones clattering in a dice game as they erupt into cheers whenever someone wins, while nearby a group of girls giggle over a game of keep away with a ball of stitched leather. Under a palm, an old couple share a joke and a slice of melon, having seen enough of life to know that these small moments are precious. And somewhere by the river's edge, a scribe on a break sketches a funny caricature of his supervisor in the sand to amuse his peers. And indeed, archaeologists have uncovered whimsical papyri, where animals mimic humans, like mice driving chariots and cats leading cattle, the ancient equivalent of cartoons, before the drawing is washed away by the next flood. Time may separate us from those days by the Nile, but the experience of joy unites us. In their leisure, the Egyptians revealed a profound optimism. For all the certainty of death that their monuments proclaim, their daily actions whisper an unspoken philosophy of life, that life is fundamentally good, that the world, in spite of its dangers, is a place to be enjoyed, and that to delight in existence is to honour the Creator. They had a term, wersha, which meant to recreate or rejuvenate oneself. It's akin to what we call recreation. Tellingly, it carries the nuance of renewal. They understood that after toil, one's spirit needed refreshment. Fun wasn't frivolous, it was restorative, a taste of the eternal bliss to come, and a vital counterweight to life's hardships. It kept the human heart light and the community bound together. Even the gods in Egyptian myth partake in joy. Hathor dances and plays music to cheer a sun god in despair. Thoth wins a gamble with the moon to add 5 extra days, and thus more birthdays and festivals, to the calendar. At the dawn of creation, the lotus flower opens with a baby sun god, inside laughing, bringing light to the world. To the Egyptians, laughter was literally the first sound the universe heard. Even their art and literature show a playful irreverence alongside deep piety. Scribes sometimes doodled animals acting like humans, cats herding geese, mice driving chariots, poking fun at the social order in private little ways. One clay ostracon, a pottery fragment, shows a lion and an antelope playing a board game. Did the Egyptians really think animals played senet? Of course not. It was a joke, an ancient cartoon with perhaps a witty caption now lost. These glimpses tell us that they could laugh at themselves and their world, and that humour was another thread woven into daily life's tapestry. Now our journey through this sun-dappled world of Egyptian leisure comes to an end. The shadows lengthen by the Nile, and one by one our new friends slip from view. The children head home, tired from swimming and wrestling. The musicians pack up their lyres and drums. The storyteller falls silent, his voice spent. The last revellers at the festival stagger contentedly to their beds as the embers of bonfires glow in the dark. In the great distance, the pyramids of Giza stand against the orange dusk, immense and eternal, the tombs of kings casting long shadows across the sands. But within those shadows there is not gloom, there is life. We have heard it in laughter and music, seen it in dance and play. The ancient Egyptians lived in the shadow of eternity, building monuments to last forever, yet they filled each day with the brightness of being alive. They knew, perhaps better than most, that every moment of happiness is sacred. As the stars emerge over the desert, imagine an Egyptian family on their rooftop enjoying the cool night air after a long day. Perhaps they are finishing a friendly game of senet by lamplight, or sharing a bowl of figs while mother sings a gentle lullaby. They look up at the same constellations we see today, Orion, which they knew as Osiris, and Sirius, the star of Isis. In that cosmic connection across thousands of years, we can feel a kinship. They laughed under these stars, they loved under these stars, they hoped under these stars. Time may separate us, but the human heart remains much the same. The tale of ancient Egyptian fun is more than a catalogue of pastimes. It is a celebration of the spirit that connects us all. It is a reminder that even in a civilization so preoccupied with death, it was the celebration of life itself that truly mattered. Their games, their music, their festivals, these were expressions of gratitude for existence. They invite us to hear the echo of a harp strumming in a distant tavern, to see the flicker of festival fires on the Nile, and to feel the same stirring in our souls that made an Egyptian remark some 3,000 years ago. True, one cannot escape death, but one can live each day so that when it comes, one has no regrets. In the end, to be fully alive, to play, to laugh, to dance with joy even in the shadow of the pyramids, is to touch the eternal. It is dawn on the Nile. A pale glow teases the edge of the eastern sky, then blooms into gold. The great river shimmers with the first light of day, and the desert beyond the green banks awakens under a blush of pink. In this magical moment, ancient Egyptians stood in silent reverence. On a temple roof across the water, white-robed priests raise their arms toward the horizon. In their hands they hold lotus blossoms and small offerings. Their silhouettes are stark against the brightening sky. The air is cool and still, yet charged with anticipation. As the sun's disk breaks free of the horizon, a cheer of jubilation rises from the priests and the gathered people below. Incense smoke curls upward, carrying prayers into the heavens. "Behold!" the priests chant, voices echoing against limestone columns. "The Lord of Light comes. Awake in peace, O Ra, shine upon us." The first rays spear through the morning mist, illuminating the faces of farmers in the fields and fishermen on their boats. Even the great Pharaoh in his palace turns toward the east, allowing the newborn sunlight to bathe his regal face. For a moment, time stands still as all of Egypt greets the solar god. This is not merely another dawn, it is a daily resurrection, a sacred ritual as old as the civilization itself. Why did the ancient Egyptians praise the sun with such devotion? What did they see in that glowing orb rising above the desert each day? To the modern mind, the sun is a star, a sphere of burning plasma, one among billions. But to the people of ancient Egypt, the sun was life, power, and divinity all at once. It was the beating heart of their world, the guarantor of order in a chaotic universe, and the link between mortal and divine. In the sun's daily journey across the sky, the Egyptians found a profound story, a cycle of birth, death, and rebirth that mirrored their own existence and the rhythm of nature around them. In its light, they felt the smile of the gods. In its heat, the passion of creation. In its regular rising and setting, the promise that cosmic balance, what they called Ma'at, the truth and order of the universe, still prevailed. To truly understand why the Egyptians exalted the sun above all, we must journey deep into their world, to their creation myths, their sacred texts, their temples and tombs, and their very psychology. We will sail down the Nile of time, from the hazy dawn of prehistory, when the first farmers and herdsmen looked up in awe at the life-giving sun, through the age of the pharaohs, when solar worship became the very ideology of the state, and onward to the radical experiment of a pharaoh who dared declare the sun as the one true God. We'll explore how archaeology unearths the tangible footprints of solar veneration in pyramids and monuments aligned to the heavens, how mythology personified the sun in multiple forms as creator, king, and warrior, weaving a rich tapestry of meaning around its daily course, how astronomy guided the Egyptians' calendars and agriculture, tying the motions of the sun to the flooding of the Nile and the abundance of their fields, how theology elevated the sun to the supreme post of the divine pantheon, yet also integrated it with a multitude of other gods in complex ways, and how philosophy and spiritual inquiry led these people to meditate on light and dark, order and chaos, finding in the sun an answer to the deepest human longings for continuity, understanding, and eternal life. A world lit by the sun. Imagine the landscape of ancient Egypt, a narrow ribbon of fertile black earth snaking through vast red deserts. Life clings to the banks of the Nile, for beyond its sustaining waters lies an infinity of sand and rock. In this environment, two natural forces defined everything: the Nile River and the sun. Herodotus, the Greek historian, famously called Egypt the gift of the Nile, and indeed, without the river's annual flood, Egyptian civilization could not have thrived. But the Nile's gift alone was not enough. It was the sun's energy that made those waters fruitful. The sun baked the floodwaters into rich soil, coaxed seeds to sprout in the fields, ripened the grain, and withered the harvest for collection. The sun's heat, intense and unrelenting, could be deadly in the height of summer, yet it was also a benevolent force drying the mud brick houses, warming the chilly desert nights, and colouring the land with life. The Egyptians keenly felt this duality. The sun was a gentle nurturer in the mild winter, a fierce punisher at midsummer, but above all a reliable presence that anchored their existence. It rose and set with comforting regularity. In a world where the Nile might sometimes flood too high or too low, where diseases or invaders might strike unpredictably, the sun's daily return was a promise that life continues and that order remains. From time immemorial, these truths were evident to the inhabitants of the Nile Valley. Long before Egypt had pharaohs or pyramids, prehistoric peoples of this region turned their attention to the sky. Archaeologists have found evidence suggesting that even pre-dynastic communities, the Neolithic ancestors of the Egyptians, paid special notice to the sun and stars. On a remote desert plain far to the south, at a place called Nabta Playa, stands a mysterious stone circle dating back perhaps 7,000 years. Its weathered megaliths appear to mark the summer solstice sunrise, the longest day of the year. Imagine those early people, cattle herders living on the desert's edge, watching the dawn on the day each year when the sun's rising point stopped creeping northward and began to move south again. They may not have understood the celestial mechanics, but they knew this heralded an important change, the onset of the summer rains far upstream, or the impending rise of the Nile waters. To them, the sun was already a cosmic timekeeper, a herald of seasonal change on which life and death could hinge. Aligning stones with the sun was a way to harmonize their lives with the heavens. Thus, before written history, the sun had already assumed a role as a guide and a godlike force in the minds of Nile dwellers. As small villages coalesced into the first kingdoms of Egypt around 3000 BCE, solar worship likely grew in complexity and scope. Though concrete records from those earliest dynasties are scarce, later traditions hint that even then the sun was revered as a supreme power. Early Egyptian religion was animistic, attributing spirits or deities to natural phenomena like the river, the sky, and of course the sun. The earliest gods included Horus, the falcon sky god, who was closely associated with the sun and the kingship. Indeed, the reigning king was called the living Horus, suggesting that the pharaoh was a manifestation of this sky deity who carried the sun in his right eye. The myth held that Horus's right eye was the sun and his left eye the moon. But soon another name for the sun appears in the record, Shut-Ra, sometimes spelled Re. By the time of the Second Dynasty, around 28th century BCE, we find royal names like Ra-En-En-Eb, Ra is my lord, indicating that the sun god Ra had risen to prominence. It is likely that a cult venerating the sun existed since pre-dynastic times, only growing more formalized as Egyptian society developed. Why the sun? One might ask why the sun, out of all natural forces, became the dominant deity of Egypt so early on. The answer lies in a convergence of practical and existential reasons. Practically, as we've seen, the sun was essential to agriculture in a land with almost no rainfall. The Nile provided water and soil, but the sun provided energy and timing. Every year, farmers sowed their crops in the moist earth left by the flood and prayed for sunny days to bring the growth. Too little sun meant a weak harvest. Too much could mean drought. So pleasing the sun, or at least acknowledging its power, was logical. But beyond the practical, there was a mystery to the sun that captivated the human imagination. The sun was dazzling to behold. One could feel its warmth on the skin, see the world it illuminated, yet not stare at its blinding face for more than an instant. It was distant, yet intimate, appearing to the east like clockwork and disappearing in the west with equal consistency. The contrast between day and night, the comfort of daylight and the vulnerability of darkness, gave the sun's daily rise and set a dramatic, almost moral dimension. Light was safety, darkness danger. Light was order, darkness chaos. The Egyptians, like many ancient peoples, felt this viscerally. When dusk fell, their world truly did change. Nocturnal predators roamed the deserts. Without electric light, the night was deep and absolute. Sitting by their flickering oil lamps or campfires, they surely longed for the dawn. And when dawn came, it was nothing short of miraculous. The sky bleeding orange and red, the first beams slicing over the palm trees, the chorus of birds erupting, a daily deliverance from fear. It is little wonder that they came to personify the sun as a god who battles through darkness to be reborn, a saviour who returns each morning to scatter the forces of night. The cosmic drama of day and night. For the ancient Egyptians, the sun was not a mere ball of fire in the sky. It was a living deity who took on different forms through the cycle of day and night. They visualized the sun's journey as a grand divine drama that repeats every 24 hours, a drama that is both natural and supernatural, weaving reality with myth. In their artistic and religious expression, they gave the sun many names and faces, each reflecting a phase of its journey and an aspect of its character. By day, the sun sailed across the sky in a golden boat upon the celestial Nile, a heavenly river or ocean that encircles the world. By night, that same sun god navigated the dark waters of the Duat, the mysterious underworld, to emerge again at dawn. Let's follow this journey as an Egyptian might have understood it, meeting the sun's various guises along the way. Dawn. In the cool twilight before sunrise, the sun god is known as Khepri. Khepri is depicted as a scarab beetle, or as a man with a scarab for a head. Why a beetle? The Egyptians observed the dung beetle rolling balls of dung across the ground and saw a metaphor for the sun's movement. Just as the scarab tirelessly pushes its ball, so Khepri rolls the sun disk up from the horizon each morning. More intriguingly, young dung beetles emerge seemingly spontaneously from those balls of dung. In reality, the eggs were laid inside. So the Egyptians believed the scarab was self-created, generating life out of nothing. Thus, Khepri symbolized the morning sun as newborn and self-renewing, an image of rebirth. His very name, Khepri, means to come into being, or the one who becomes. At dawn, Khepri the scarab is pushing the solar orb up out of the embrace of the earth. In hues of purple and rose, the Egyptians saw the first hints of Khepri's efforts. The lotus flower, which blooms at dawn, was a symbol of the newborn sun as well. In some creation myths, a giant lotus rose from primordial waters and revealed the infant sun god sitting at its heart, just as a real lotus opens to show its golden center. For Egyptians awakening at sunrise, Khepri's triumph over darkness was deeply felt. One ancient hymn dramatically praises the rising sun. Hail, thou Aten, Lord of rays, who rises on the horizon day by day. It begins. It goes on to describe how at night all lay in darkness, as if in death. People in their beds, no one seeing their neighbour, while predators prowled and snakes bit. Then, the earth becomes light when you rise in the horizon. Men wake, stand upon their feet, for you have lifted them up. They wash and dress, their arms uplifted in praise at your appearing. In these words, inscribed over 3,300 years ago in the tomb of the pharaoh, Akhenaten's courtier, we hear how vivid and joyous the dawn was to the Egyptian heart. It was literally a daily resurrection, a fresh beginning bestowed by the sun. Noon, as the sun climbed higher and the day grew bright and hot, the sun god took the form of Ra, or Re. Ra is the most famous and important of the Egyptian sun deities, often shown as a strong man with the head of a falcon, crowned with a blazing solar disk encircled by a cobra. At the height of day, the sun's power is at full strength, pouring down from directly overhead. Ra embodied this zenith of solar brilliance. He was the sun at its pinnacle, mature, potent, and unyielding. In one list of his forms, it said, "At morning he is Khepri, at noon he is Ra, at evening he is Atum." Ra's falcon head signifies his link to the sky, like Horus the falcon, and the cobra around the sun disk, the uraeus, represents the sun's fiery protective might, ready to spit venom at any who threaten the cosmic order. The Egyptians often simply called the sun by the name Ra, which also meant day in their language. This suggests how synonymous the sun and daylight itself were with the god's identity. At noon, the world was flooded with light, nothing hidden from Ra's gaze. The sun high in the sky could be mercilessly hot in Egypt. Travellers in the desert at midday felt Ra's wrath as their skin burned and throats parched. But that very intensity also made Ra kingly and awe-inspiring. He was often titled Ra Horakti, meaning Ra, Horus of the two horizons, to signify his dominion from the eastern horizon of morning to the western horizon of evening. In art, he can appear enthroned in his solar boat, surrounded by other gods who accompany him as crew, sailing the ocean of the sky. As midday Ra, the sun god was typically benevolent, shining equally on all lands, giving light and life. The absence of shadows at noon symbolized clarity and truth. Thus Ra was also associated with justice. The sun is the bestower of light and life to the totality of the cosmos. With his unblinking, all-seeing eye, he is the stern guarantor of justice, writes one historian. Under Ra's bright eye, wrongdoers have nowhere to hide, a concept Egyptians took to heart. They believed Ra could see everything that happened in the world, and as a just king he upheld Ma'at, punishing the wicked eventually. Many pharaohs, seen as earthly representatives of Ra, prided themselves on being just, and were often depicted making offerings of Ma'at, personified as a small goddess with a feather, to Ra, indicating that the king offers truth to the sun, and the sun in turn maintains the world's order. Sunset. As the afternoon waned and the sun neared the western horizon, the Egyptians saw their solar deity aging and transforming once more, now into Atum. Atum was portrayed as an elderly man, sometimes wearing the double crown of Egypt, sometimes leaning on a staff. He could also appear ram-headed or even as a scarab at times, but his primary identity was as the setting sun and a creator god. In the mythic narrative, Atum is actually the primeval creator who existed alone at the dawn of time. We will explore this in a moment, but he was also identified with the sun's final daily phase, the weakening light of dusk, the sun who has completed his work. The name Atum can mean the all, or the complete one, fitting for the sun that has travelled the whole sky and now contains the sum of the day's journey. As sunset approached, Egyptians sensed the sun's visible power diminishing, the light turning red and soft, the air cooling. They believed Atum, the great elder, was preparing to depart the world of the living. The western horizon, where the sun disappears, was called Manu. It was likened to a mountain or gateway. They imagined the sun descending into the mouth of a huge celestial cow, a form of the sky goddess, or into a cave beyond the western mountains. A vivid line from the pyramid texts addresses the sun at dusk. Homage to thee who settest as Atum in beauty. Thou settest in the western horizon of Manu, and art greeted by the gods. And it describes how even the imperishable stars in the sky rejoice as Ra-Atum enters the underworld. The sky goddess Nut was sometimes said to swallow the sun in the evening. In tomb paintings, Nut is shown as a vast nude woman arching over the earth, covered in stars. One image depicts her swallowing the sun at sunset, and later giving birth to it at dawn. This powerful symbolism linked sunset with death, but not an endless death, rather a necessary step before rebirth. The West, where the sun died each day, became the land of the dead in Egyptian thought. Indeed, all major cemeteries and tombs were situated on the west bank of the Nile, at Thebes, at Giza, at Saqqara, because that was the direction of sunset associated with the soul's journey to the afterlife. Egyptians often used euphemisms for death like going to one's west. As the sun set, families might pause to bid it farewell, perhaps with a mix of gratitude and apprehension. Thank you for the day's light. Return safely again. The world was about to plunge into darkness. Would the sun make it through the perilous night and rise again? They trusted it would, but that trust was reinforced by elaborate myth and ritual. As we shall see, the Egyptians did not simply assume sunrise would come. They took spiritual measures to help it come, to assist their beloved Ra in winning the battle against darkness, night and the underworld. The moment the sun vanished below the horizon, the visible deity was gone, yet the Egyptians knew he was not truly extinguished. Rather, he travelled through the Duat, the vast netherworld that lay beyond the horizon or beneath the earth. This journey was conceived as a continuation of the solar bark's voyage. Now the god steered his boat through a pitch-black subterranean river or along the underside of Nut's body. The night was divided into 12 hours or stages, each presenting new trials. The most comprehensive account of this journey comes from funerary texts of the New Kingdom around 1500 to 1000 BCE, such as the Amduat, Book of What Is in the Underworld, and the Book of Gates, which were painted on the walls of royal tombs like cosmic comic strips for the deceased pharaoh to follow. In these texts we see the sun god in his night form, often called Ra still, or sometimes addressed as Osiris Ra, since at night he fused with Osiris, lord of the underworld and of the dead. Let's unpack that. Osiris was a separate deity, the god of fertility, death and resurrection, who ruled the Duat as a kind of king of the afterlife. The Egyptians envisioned that when the sun set, Ra, in a sense, died like a mortal and entered Osiris's realm. At the darkest midpoint of night, Ra's power was at its lowest ebb, and at that moment he and Osiris merged. One might picture it as the sun's soul meeting the soul of the dead, a profound union of two great gods representing life and death. Through this union, Ra received a renewed life force from Osiris, who embodied regenerative powers, and Osiris, in turn, got the illumination and vital energy of Ra. Together they ensured that both the sun would rise again, and the dead, symbolized by Osiris, would eventually be reborn. An ancient text put it succinctly: the sun god spent the 12 hours of the night travelling in the underworld, ultimately merging with Osiris, the primary funerary deity. The journey was treacherous, and the sun god faced his enemy, Apophis, who threatened him nightly. Apophis, the arch-villain of the piece. Also called Apep, this was a gargantuan serpent, embodiment of chaos, Isfet, who lurked in the darkest pits of the Duat, waiting to attack Ra's boat. Every single night without fail, Apophis would attempt to devour the sun or halt its voyage, which would spell doom, eternal night, the end of the world. This wasn't a one-time myth, but an eternal cycle. Apophis was never permanently killed, only subdued, and he rose again each night to try anew. The imagery of these battles is dramatic. Picture Ra standing at the helm of his bark, flanked by gods like Seth, the god of chaos, who oddly enough defended the sun against Apophis's greater chaos, and Isis, armed with spears and spells. The serpent coils out of the darkness, its scales blotting out stars, its jaws open to engulf the boat. A fierce fight ensues, thunder echoes, for storms were seen as echoes of this cosmic fight. Waters churn. Ultimately, Ra's allies prevail. Seth's spear, or Isis's magic, slices through Apophis, who writhes and is dismembered. The sunbark continues its course, but Apophis, being a creature of chaos, cannot truly die. By the next night, his demonic body knits itself back together, awaiting another clash. To the Egyptians, this story was more than myth. it was moral allegory and ritual imperative. It meant that order, ma'at, is always fighting off chaos, and each day's sunrise is a victory that should never be taken for granted. If one morning the sun did not rise, it would mean Apophis had won and the cosmos had collapsed into disorder. This horrifying prospect impelled the Egyptians to do everything possible to help Ra. Priests performed nightly rituals to aid Ra in his underworld war. They crafted wax figurines of Apophis, ritually cursed and destroyed them, hacked them with knives, and burned them while reciting spells of annihilation. These banishing of Apophis ceremonies were carried out regularly, perhaps at sunset or sunrise, to ensure the sun's safe passage. One text in the British Museum instructs priests on how to draw images of Apophis and then ritually trample and burn them to bind the serpent's power. The Egyptians even interpreted eclipses as temporary victories of Apophis. When the sun disk was blotted out, it was as if the serpent had coiled around it. But since eclipses passed, they believed the gods quickly rescued Ra and sliced open Apophis's belly to free the sun. Imagine the panic and fervent prayers an eclipse might have sparked. The sky growing eerily dim in daytime, people wailing and clanging drums to scare off the serpent, then cheering in overwhelming relief as the light returned. Every dawn in Egypt was, in this cosmic perspective, the triumphant conclusion of a harrowing journey. Ra has defeated the dragon, order has overcome chaos, and the world can continue for one more day. Finally, in the pre-dawn hour, the sun prepared to be reborn. According to some myths, the solar bark would approach the eastern horizon from beneath, and there a wondrous event took place. Sometimes it's said that Nut, the sky goddess, gave birth to Ra just before sunrise. She, pregnant with the sun through the night, now labours and brings him forth as a radiant child. Other accounts say a great scarab, Khipri, appears to push the sun out of the underworld. One striking image from the Book of Gates shows a giant scarab beetle actually rolling the sun disk up from between the legs of Nut, who is shown upside down with her legs to either side, a symbolic rebirth canal, while nearby the goddesses of the east and west look on. In another version, a giant lotus blooms in the dark waters, and from it emerges a divine infant, the young sun, sometimes depicted as a child with a sidelock of youth, sucking his thumb, often seated on that lotus. The Egyptians loved this image of the sun's innocence at dawn. One statuette from Tutankhamun's tomb shows the boy king Tutankhamun himself merging with this motif, depicted as a tiny child arising from a lotus, symbolizing the sun at creation and dawn. The lotus child cries out, and his tears, the myth said, became the first humans, a poetic way to express that humankind was born from the earliest sunrise. With the first light of dawn, the great cycle began anew. Ra, in the form of Khipri, now climbed back into the day. Sky, victorious and rejuvenated. This cyclical view of time, the endless repetition of day and night, struggle and victory, gave the Egyptians a sense that the universe was eternally renewing itself. Each sunrise wasn't just another day, it was creation happening again. The Egyptians literally equated dawn with the original moment of creation. In their texts, dawn is called the first occasion. They had multiple creation myths, but the most influential one, the Heliopolitan cosmogony, from the city of Heliopolis, the centre of sun worship whose Egyptian name was Iunu, begins with darkness and waters. In the beginning there was only none, the boundless primeval ocean that existed before anything else. There was no light, no sound, no time. Out of this watery chaos, a single mound of earth emerged, the Benben, an archetypal hillock that was the first land. And upon this mound, the sun god Atum brought himself into being. The pyramid texts, carved inside 5th dynasty pyramids around 2400 BCE, preserve perhaps the earliest record of this idea. One line hails Atum, saying, "You arose shining in the beginning when the world was still dark." Atum, who, as noted, is the same as the evening sun but here is cast as the first god, was self-created. Some versions say he simply willed himself into existence. Others, more humorously, say he sneezed or masturbated, producing the first gods from his bodily fluids, the idea being that nothing existed except Atum, so he had to use himself to create. At Heliopolis, a sacred stone called the Benben stone was venerated, likely a pyramid-shaped stone that symbolized this primeval mound, and perhaps the first ray of sunlight that struck it. The Benben stone may have been a prototype for both the pyramid shape and the obelisks later erected, pointed shafts that caught the first light of dawn. Indeed, one legend held that the Benben was the spot on which the sun's rays first landed on the first morning. From Atum's solo act of creation came the other elements of the universe. He produced the first divine couple, Shu, air, and Tefnut, moisture, by spitting them out or breathing them out. They in turn birthed Geb, earth, and Nut, sky, who then produced Osiris, Isis, Seth, and Nephthys, the gods who would play roles in human destiny. Thus the Ennead, or group of 9 gods of Heliopolis, was formed, all ultimately emanating from Atum, the sun. What's important is that light and the sun were central to creation. Atum was essentially a sun god creating the world. Some depictions even merge Atum with Ra in this context, calling him Re-Atum, to make explicit that it was the sun that first emerged from the chaos. A tomb painting might show the sun as a disk rising over the primordial waters, with a caption like, "The first sunrise." Egyptians would say at dawn, "Ra comes into being in glory in the east," echoing the creation itself. Their word for the act of creation, keeper, was the same word as the name of Khepri, the scarab, who pushes the sun. Thus to create and to become, and to have the sun emerge were all conceptually linked. By aligning the daily sunrise with the moment of creation, the Egyptians imbued each day with sacred significance. Every morning sun was not just a repeat of the last, it was the world being born anew. And this belief had real effects on their mindset and rituals. For instance, every morning in temples across the land, priests enacted elaborate dawn rituals to welcome the sun and awaken the gods. They would open the sanctuary of the god's statue at first light, symbolically uncovering the deity to the day, wash and clothe the statue, and present offerings, a ritual thought to mirror what the sun did for the world, illuminating, revivifying, nourishing. There were even special shrines on temple roofs known as sun chapels, where priests could stand under the open sky at daybreak to perform hymns and burn incense as the sun rose. Imagine a priest atop the temple of Karnak at dawn. As the eastern horizon brightens, he faces it and recites a hymn to the rising sun. Such hymns survive on papyri and tomb walls. One says, "Awake in peace, O Ra, you who rise in the horizon, Lord of the sky. You shine bright in the morning, filling every land with your beauty. All the gods rejoice when they see you, King of heaven." The priest would light a torch or brazier with fresh fire, a symbol of the first sunrise, and carry it into the sanctuary to light up the Holy of Holies. Temples were constructed to accentuate these moments of solar contact. Many were aligned on an east-west axis so that on certain days, often the equinoxes or solstices, the sun's rays would shoot straight through the gateway and halls to illuminate the innermost sanctum. The temple, of Amun-Ra at Karnak, for example, is angled such that at winter solstice, the sun's rebirth, at the end of the year's longest night, the sunrise illuminates the central shrine of the god. At Abu Simbel in Nubia, Pharaoh Ramesses II built a grand rock-cut temple, oriented so that twice a year, around February 22nd and October 22nd, believed to be his coronation and birth dates or related to the agricultural cycle, the rising sun beams down the deep corridor to light up the statues of the gods, and Ramesses himself among them, in the back chamber. Hundreds of modern visitors still gather at dawn on those days to witness that alignment, a testament to the enduring genius of those ancient architects who used the sun as their collaborator. By now it's clear that the Egyptians didn't just worship the sun abstractly, they integrated it into all facets of life, temporal, spatial, spiritual. The sun's cycle gave them their fundamental framework for understanding time. They divided the day into hours based on the sun's motion and the year into seasons partly guided by solar position and length of day. Interestingly, the Egyptian year was divided into 3 seasons: inundation, Akhet, growth, Peret, and harvest, Shemu, which were more tied to the Nile's cycles, but because the Nile flood coincided roughly with the heliacal rising of the star Sirius in July, rather than a solstice, their formal calendar wasn't purely solar. However, they keenly observed the solstices and equinoxes. The summer solstice, around June 21st, was significant because it roughly coincided with the rising of Sirius and the new year. At some temples, Abydos, Dendera, Edfu among them, the sun's position at solstice was marked by specific alignments. The Egyptians recognized that the sun's annual cycle, its slight shifting north and south and the changing length of day, affected the seasons even if their everyday calendar was civil, 365 days without leap years, and thus drifted over time. We see evidence in temple inscriptions and in the orientation of various sanctuaries that they celebrated or at least noted the solstice transitions, linking them to myths of death and rebirth. For example, the winter solstice, shortest day, was seen as the rebirth of the sun in the year's cycle, the time when days would start to lengthen again, analogous to the sun's rebirth at dawn. The Karnak alignment at winter solstice, illuminating Amun-Ra's statue, might have been part of a festival acknowledging that cosmic turning point. Though much of this is reconstructed by modern scholars through astronomical studies of temple orientations, it is consistent with how thoroughly the Egyptians sacralized the solar cycle. Ra, the supreme sun, god and creation's king among all the forms of the sun, Ra, Re, eventually became preeminent. We've met Ra at midday, we've heard of him as Ra Horakti and as Re-Atum at sunset. But Ra was more than a time-of-day deity. He evolved into the overarching sun god par excellence, often effectively representing the sun at all times. From very early on, Ra was identified as the creator of everything. A text from the New Kingdom proclaims, "One by himself alone didst thou come into being from the primeval waters of Nu. Thou hast made all that is, the earth, men and women, cattle, beasts, all that walk or fly." This was addressed to Ra. He was the demiurge, the one who began the creation, either as Atum or in tandem with Atum. The epithet Ra, father of the gods, is common, implying all other gods ultimately descended from him, as the Ennead myth suggests. Ra's central place in Egyptian religion solidified early. By the 4th dynasty, circa 2500 BCE, pharaohs were actively linking themselves to Ra. King Jedefre, son of Khufu, the builder of the Great Pyramid, took the title Son of Ra, Sa-Ra, as part of his royal titulary, the first we know to explicitly do so. This marked a new ideology. The pharaoh was not only the incarnation of Horus in life and Osiris in death, but also the literal offspring of Ra, the sun. Every king thereafter adopted the title Son of Ra, Lord of the Two Lands. Name. To the Egyptians this was not metaphorical. They truly believed the king's authority derived from the sun god. Royal mothers were sometimes depicted being impregnated by the radiance of Ra to conceive the future king. A scene at Luxor Temple shows Amun-Ra in this role for Queen Mutemwia, mother of Amenhotep III. Earlier, a Middle Kingdom tale preserved in the Westcar Papyrus tells how the first three kings of the 5th dynasty were the triplet sons of the sun god Ra, born to the wife of a high priest of Ra. In that story, the god Ra himself comes to the woman in the guise of her husband, and through divine intervention she bears. Kings, thus transitioning rule from the previous dynasty to Ra's progeny. Such myths legitimized new dynasties by giving them heavenly pedigree, and not just any heaven, the solar heaven. The 5th dynasty, circa 2450 to 2320 BCE, in particular, is often called the Sun Kings dynasty. Almost every pharaoh of that line took names honoring Ra: Usakaf, Sahure, he who is close to Ra; Neferirkare, beautiful is the soul of Ra; Noizera, possessed of Ra's power, etc. These kings went a step further. They built dedicated sun temples to Ra in addition to their pyramids. At a place called Abu Ghurab, north of Saqqara, 2 such temple sites have been excavated, Usakaf's and Noizera's, and records suggest up to 6 might have existed. These sun temples were open-air complexes featuring a squat obelisk-like tower, symbolic of the Ben stone, the first sunbeam, atop a large platform, and an altar where offerings were made directly to Ra under the sky. One temple had a courtyard with a row of huge basins, likely for collecting water, perhaps to reflect the sun or for purification rites. Reliefs found show scenes of the Jubilee Festival and the king interacting with the sun's symbolism, which indicates these were used in royal rituals. Scholars debate their function. Some think they served the king's afterlife, their proximity to pyramids and being on the West Bank, land of the dead, hints they might be part of the king's mortuary cult. Others argue they were for the living cult of the sun, a place where each day's journey of Ra could be observed and aided by offerings, thereby legitimizing the king's current rule. It could be both, the king tying his legacy to Ra while alive, ensuring he is seen as Ra's son in the eyes of subjects, and preparing to join Ra after death. Crucially, this surge in Ra worship was tied to the concept of Ma'at, the cosmic order. The kings made it their duty to uphold Ma'at, and one of the principal ways was by sustaining the cult of Ra. They believed if they performed the proper rituals to Ra, giving him his daily sustenance of prayers, incense, and sacrifices, Ra would in turn keep the universe running smoothly. The sun would rise reliably, the Nile would flood at the right time, the seasons would proceed, and Egypt would flourish. A 5th dynasty inscription might state that the king offers Ma'at to Ra daily. In a metaphorical sense, the king was feeding Ra with order, truth, and Ra responded by maintaining that order in nature. It is a beautifully reciprocal idea. Human society keeps ritual order so that the divine keeps cosmic order. To miss a ritual, to slack in devotion, was not just impious. It risked tipping the balance and inviting chaos, apophis, drought, famine, war. Thus, praising the sun was tantamount to securing life itself. Over time, as Egyptian religion evolved, Ra's identity expanded further through a process known as syncretism, the combining of deities. Ra proved to be a kind of universal glue that could stick to many other gods, creating composite forms. By the Middle Kingdom circa 2000 BCE, nearly every major god was being linked with Ra in some fashion. For example, Amun, originally a local Theban air or wind god, whose name meant the Hidden One, rose to prominence and eventually merged with Ra to become Amun-Ra, effectively uniting the concept of an invisible, transcendent creator, Amun, with the visible, immanent source of life, Ra. Amun-Ra was worshipped as king of the gods by the New Kingdom, when Thebes, Amun's city, became the religious capital. Similarly, Montu-Ra, Montu was a war god, so Montu-Ra was a sun god of war. Sobek-Ra, Sobek, the crocodile god, fused with Ra, perhaps reflecting the sun's might mirrored in the ferocity of a crocodile. Khnum-Ra, Khnum, the ram-headed creator, fused with a Ra, and many others. Even Hathor and Isis goddesses were sometimes called the Eye of Ra, or associated as Ra's daughter or counterpart in myth, yet they too could merge. Isis absorbed solar attributes as a protector of Ra. Why this blending? It wasn't that the Egyptians were confused or just consolidating for simplicity. Rather, they saw the divine world as fluid and interconnected. Ra's light was so universal that any god could be seen as just one facet of Ra's radiance without losing their own personality. As the scholar Jan Assmann noted, Ra served as a kind of universal god because his light literally touched every corner of the land and every being. He was omnipresent in the daylight and all-powerful as the creator, so it was natural to conceptualize that other gods lived through Ra or were aspects of Ra when it came to cosmic functions. The sun was, after all, the center of the observable universe for them. One dramatic expression of this idea appears in the Litany of Re, a New Kingdom text first found in the tomb of Thutmose III, circa 1450 BCE, which lists 75 different names or forms of Ra. The text basically says Ra is one and Ra is many. He is Khepri, Ra, Atum. He is the lion at dawn, the heron, Bennu bird, at dawn. He is the ram in the west. He is the maker of eternity. He is the soul of Osiris, etc. An extensive catalogue of syncretic identities. To recite the litany was to acknowledge that the sun subsumed all these divine powers. So comprehensive was Ra's nature that an idea began to form. Could Ra be not just supreme, but soul, light of the Aten, Akhenaten's radical worship? About 1,000 years after the pyramid texts were carved, in the 14th century BCE, a pharaoh of the 18th dynasty named Amenhotep IV ascended the throne. Influenced perhaps by generations of priests and theologians who had contemplated Ra's greatness, this king made an extraordinary leap of faith. He declared that the sun alone was God, not just the highest God, but the only God worth worshipping. He changed his name to Akhenaten, meaning servant of the Aten, and embarked on what some call history's first experiment in monotheism, or at least monolatry, exclusive worship of one god. Who or what was the Aten? The word Aten in Egyptian simply meant the sun disk. It referred to the physical disk of the sun, as opposed to the personal deity Ra, who could take many forms. The Aten had been mentioned as far back as the Middle Kingdom as a generic term, even invoked in some hymns. But Akhenaten elevated this Aten to a new status. The Aten became the sole god, depicted not in anthropomorphic form, but as a literal golden sun disk with rays streaming down. Each ray ended in a tiny hand, often shown extending the symbol of life, the Ankh, to the nostrils of the king and queen. It was a striking new iconography, a god with no face except the sun itself, reaching out with dozens of warm, life-giving hands. Akhenaten shut down the temples of Amun and the other gods, redirected resources to the Aten's worship, and even built a completely new capital city in Middle Egypt, which he named Akhetaten, horizon of the Aten, known today as Amarna. There, under the open sky, he and his beautiful wife, Nefertiti, led a religious revolution, praising the sun from dawn till dusk in open-air temples with no roofs, for the Aten was best worshipped directly under its light. What drove Akhenaten to such a drastic break with tradition? Perhaps he was a visionary mystic who genuinely believed in the Aten's exclusive supremacy. Perhaps he was also motivated by a desire to curb the powerful Amun priesthood and centralize religious power under himself, the Aten's prophet. In any case, his approach to the sun was deeply poetic and personal. The king composed, or had composed, hymns to the Aten that are among the most exquisite in Egyptian literature. The longest of these, often called the Great Hymn to the Aten, was inscribed in several tombs of Amarna courtiers. It reveals how Akhenaten perceived the sun, and it's worth delving into because it encapsulates many reasons the sun was worshipped, distilled through one man's passionate devotion. As dawn breaks, the hymn says, "Your dawning is beautiful in the horizon of heaven, O living Aten, beginning of life. When you rise in the eastern horizon, you fill every land with your beauty. You are beauteous, great, radiant, high over every land. Your rays embrace the lands, for you are the sun, and you reach their farthest bounds." Akhenaten marvels at the sun's ability to touch everywhere, even though it is distant. Though you are far, your rays are upon the earth. You are in their faces, yet your form is unseen. He describes the daily cycle in vivid detail. At night, when the Aten sets, the world is in darkness, as if dead. People sleep in their chambers, heads wrapped up, and not even a thief fears detection because all is black. The lions come out from their dens, serpents and vermin creep and bite. But when the Aten arises, the earth is bright, you cast out the darkness. When you send forth your rays, the two lands, Egypt, awaken. People rise and stand, for you have raised them. They wash and dress, their arms uplifted in praise at your appearing. All the cattle settle down in their pastures. The trees and plants grow green. Birds flutter from their nests and lift their wings in adoration of your Ka, spirit. All the sheep dance on their feet, the creatures of the desert leap before you, and the fish in the river dart up to meet your rays. This is essentially a joyful catalogue of how every living thing responds gratefully to sunlight. It betrays a profound observation of nature, that life is synchronized with the sun. Diurnal. Animals wake at first light. Blossoms open. Even fish swim near the surface when the sun penetrates the water. Akhenaten's hymn goes further, crediting the Aten with directly creating and sustaining life. He says, "You make the seed grow in women, you create the fluid in men. You give life to the son in his mother's womb, soothing him so he does not cry, nursing him in the womb with your own heat. When he emerges, you open his mouth and supply his nourishment. The chick in the egg chirps inside the shell. You give it breath within to preserve it alive. When you hatch it from the egg, it comes out to chirp and run on its little legs. How perfect are your works." Here the sun isn't just a distant provider, it's an intimate caregiver, a cosmic midwife ensuring babies, human or bird, survive the peril of gestation. One can imagine that the Aten's gentle warmth was thought to incubate the egg and warm the pregnant mother's belly, unseen but vital. The hymn is also notable for its universalism. It is not just Egypt the Aten cares for. Akhenaten notes that Aten created the nations of Syria and Nubia as well, giving all people their diverse languages, skin colours, and customs, yet providing for all of them with sunlight and the natural world. He even mentions that Aten placed a Nile in the sky for foreign lands, i.e. rain, and the real Nile that flows from the underworld for Egypt. This is a brilliant theological explanation. Egypt gets almost no rain, but its Nile floods annually, whereas distant lands rely on rain rivers. To the Egyptian mind, it is the sun, Aten, who manages both, drawing water to the sky to drop on far lands, and pulling up the Nile's water from beneath for Egypt. So everywhere the Aten feeds and sustains life. The hymn repeatedly calls the Aten the one God, with refrains like, "O sole God beside whom there is none, and you alone are God, shining in your form of the living Aten, dazzling far yet near." Akhenaten boldly states that no one truly knows the Aten except the king himself. Your son, Neferkeperur Wayan-Re, Akhenaten's throne name. The king claims a unique understanding, as if to say, others see the sun and get life from it, but I have perceived the true singular divinity behind it all. This exclusivity was part of his creed. He acted as the sole intermediary, the high priest of the Aten for the nation. Each evening Akhenaten and Nefertiti would watch the sun descend behind the horizon cliffs of Amarna. One can imagine them standing on a balcony of their palace, a scene actually depicted in some art, watching the golden disk sink and the rays withdraw their blessed hands. It was bittersweet. In one tomb painting, the royal couple is shown offering flowers to the Aten as it sets, perhaps in thanks for the day. Akhenaten's beliefs did not fear the sunset per se, for he emphasized the daily rebirth aspect more than the underworld drama. In fact, the Amarna religion rejected the old underworld-focused practices. No more Osiris, no more elaborate tomb rituals to join the sunboat at night. Instead, they focused on the here and now, the living world under the sun. The king even changed funerary texts to address the Aten rather than Osiris. For about 17 years, this unusual focus persisted. But after Akhenaten's death, his son, the famous Tutankhamun, originally named Tutankhaten, restored the old order. The temples of Amun reopened, the capital returned to Thebes, and the Aten cult was largely abandoned. Later pharaohs, embarrassed or angered by Akhenaten's heresy, called him the criminal of Amarna and tried to erase his memory, chipping out his name and images. They even waged a propaganda war, claiming that under Akhenaten the land had fallen into disarray, perhaps drought or neglect had occurred, and only by appeasing Amun and the traditional gods could Egypt be righted. Akhenaten's city was left to crumble in the desert, so ended Egypt's brief flirtation with monotheism centered on the sun. Yet, interestingly, the legacy of Akhenaten's theology didn't disappear entirely. Elements of it seeped subtly back into mainstream religion. The idea of one God manifesting in all creation perhaps influenced later thought about the hidden unity of the divine. The term Aten remained in use simply to mean the sun's disk, but the poetry of Akhenaten's hymns survived on some level. For example, Psalm 104 of the Bible, written centuries later, has uncanny parallels to the great hymn to Aten in describing how all creatures rely on the sun and God's provision, leading some to speculate that the psalmist knew of the Aten hymn or its sentiments. If nothing else, Akhenaten had demonstrated the ultimate exaltation of the sun, to deem it so worthy that one could discard all other deities in its favour. It was a step too far for Egyptians of the time, but it underscored dramatically why the sun commanded such veneration. It alone, visibly, had the qualities one might attribute to the supreme deity, singular, sustaining, unifying, unfailing, most of the time, the source of all life, the sun in the afterlife and royal destiny. We've touched on the sun's importance in funerary belief while exploring the underworld journey, but let's delve a bit deeper. For the Egyptians, a key reason to praise the sun was the hope of immortality it offered. Death was a great uncertainty, a plunge into darkness like the setting sun. But just as they trusted the sun to rise again, they hoped that they too, after setting in death, could be reborn in a new dawn of the afterlife. The sun's cycle provided a powerful analogy and mechanism for this hope. Early on, in the pyramid texts, which were spells reserved for the pharaoh's tomb in the Old Kingdom, many utterances are aimed at attaching the pharaoh's soul to the sun's journey. One spell might conjure a ladder for the king to climb to the sky to join Ra. Another might transform the king into a bird or a beam of light, so he can fly up and accompany the solar bark. "Behold, O Ra, your son comes to you," one text proclaims. "King Unas comes to you, that he may stride in your steps in the sky, as you go forth in darkness and emerge in light. He is with you, united in the darkness, that he may rise on the horizon with you, where you shine as the morning sun." Ma'at. In this poetic metaphor, the deceased king is hitching a ride with Ra, going through the darkness together and rising at dawn together. Another dramatic pyramid text spell calls on the sun directly. "O Ra, take the king with you in your boat, that he may sail the sky and never perish." The king, being divine, had the privilege of joining Ra's crew, or even merging into Ra's own identity. One late Old Kingdom pharaoh even took the name Nebhperur, Lord of Ra's appearances, indicating he saw himself as one with the sun's daily epiphanies. By the Middle Kingdom and New Kingdom, this solar afterlife was democratized to some extent. Now, even commoners, if they could afford the proper coffin texts or books of the dead, had spells to go forth by day, a phrase meaning to become an akh, effective spirit, who can leave the tomb and see the sunlight again. A typical vignette on a papyrus shows the deceased being lifted up by a scarab or emerging from a tomb to bask in the morning sun. The text might include an address to Ra, such as, "Hail Ra in your rising, grant that my soul may ascend to the sky and behold your beauties. Let me travel in your boat in peace. Let me join the never-setting stars and not perish." Indeed, one of the happiest fates for an Egyptian soul was to become an imperishable star. Those are the circumpolar stars that never dip below the horizon, symbolizing eternity, or to be part of Ra's retinue in the heavens. In many New Kingdom tombs, we find the deceased depicted in the presence of Ra or praying to the sun. A lovely example. Some coffins had the interior of the lid painted with the sky goddess Nut arched overhead, as if the dead is lying inside Nut's body. Often Nut is inscribed saying to the deceased, "I receive you, I enfold you. I am Nut, I will give you birth every day like the sun." The idea is that the coffin is a womb of Nut, and the deceased will be reborn each day, just like she births Ra each morning. This is a profound promise. The sun's cycle guarantees that death is not permanent. Morning will come. The heart of the Egyptian afterlife was about renewal, not static paradise. They didn't long for an eternal harp-strumming existence. They longed for cycles of renewal, to die and be reborn, as crops do, as the sun does, as Osiris does via his son Horus. So praising the sun was also a way of saying, "See us, Ra, and include us in your cycle of resurrection. Don't leave us behind in the darkness." Even the architecture of tombs embraced solar symbolism. The pyramids themselves, with their triangular sides, were often associated with the sun's rays. Some scholars suggest that the pyramid shape was a stylized ray of sunlight descending to Earth, or the shape the sunlight takes as it breaks through clouds. Think of crepuscular rays. The pyramid capstone, often gilded, would flash in the sun, perhaps representing that Benben stone of Heliopolis, where the sun first shone. In the Valley of the Kings, tombs were cut into the western cliffs, and the valley itself has a natural peak, Al-Qurn, that is shaped like a pointed pyramid or obelisk. When the sun sets behind that peak, one can imagine the effect on a believing Egyptian. The sun settles into that pyramid mountain, pouring its essence into all the tombs hidden below it, including the pharaohs, to charge them with life for the long night until the soul might rise again. In temple reliefs, pharaohs are often shown holding up a small figure of Ma'at, the goddess of truth or order, to Ra or Amun-Ra. This represents the king offering the god what is most desired, Ma'at, and in return the sun god grants the king the rule of the world. One text has Ra telling the king, "As you uphold Ma'at, I make you eternal like me." So long as the pharaoh did not stray into injustice, Isfet, Ra would bless his reign and ensure a place for him in the eternal sky, the sun and the divine right of kings. The concept of sacred kingship in Egypt is inseparable from solar theology. The king was often likened to the sun in various ways. In youthful vigour, he was the rising sun, Horus, at the height of his power. He was like Ra at noon. In his old age or death he was Atum, setting, but destined to rise anew through his heir. Many formal epithets of the king reference the sun. For instance, the throne name of Ramesses II was User Mat Ra, meaning the power of Ra's justice, implying he rules by Ra's authority and with Ra's Ma'at. Another pharaoh, Thutmose IV, had the prenomen Menkaperur. Established are the forms of Ra. Clearly, invoking Ra in one's very name gave a stamp of divine legitimacy. The king was often called Sa-Ra, the son of Ra, in inscriptions and cartouches. This wasn't considered blasphemous or exclusive the way Akhenaten's monotheism was, because in the normal religion, the king being son of Ra didn't mean others couldn't worship different gods. It was understood as a special relationship. Ra had sired or adopted the pharaoh as his earthly representative, his solar champion on earth. The ideology went even further. Not only was the king born of the sun god, but at times he was equated with the sun. Especially during the New Kingdom, when pharaohs like Amenhotep III were deified while alive, some hymns describe the king's face as shining like the sun, or the king's authority radiating to foreign lands as the sun's rays do. One inscription from Amenhotep III's time calls him the dazzling Aten, ironically a title his son Akhenaten would later exclusively reserve for the sun. Foreign tributes and conquests were sometimes poetically described as the sun's expansion. As the sun's rays subdue darkness, the pharaoh subdued rebels. To common people, the pharaoh's appearance could be literally blinding and sun-like. Imagine the king in ceremonial garb, wearing the Nemes headdress with the Uraeus cobra on his brow. That cobra, which spouts fire in myth, was said to protect the king by spitting flames at his enemies, essentially a personification of the sun's consuming heat. The king's diadem often had a sun disk on it too. When he rode out in chariots of electrum, gold-silver alloy, polished to brilliance, as described at the Battle of Kadesh, observers wrote that he shone brighter than the sun. He was a mighty Baal, to use a Syrian analogy. This wasn't pure aggrandizement. It was conceptually key. The pharaoh was the guarantee that the sun would continue to rise. In temple rituals, it was officially the king who performed daily offerings to the gods, though in practice priests did it in his stead. If the king failed in his piety or governance, it was feared the gods might withdraw favour, perhaps even stalling the sun or altering the Nile's flood. During the intermediate periods of strife in Egyptian history, texts bemoan that Ra has turned his face away due to mankind's disorder, linking political unrest with cosmic disturbance. Conversely, during the Jubilee Sed festival, held after a king had ruled 30 years to rejuvenate his strength, one part of the ritual had the king run a circuit and then sit on a throne facing the south and then the north, wearing the white crown and red crown, respectively, symbolically reasserting dominion. Some scholars believe this had a solar aspect too. The running could mimic the sun's journey across the sky, east to west, and the stationing at cardinal points mimic the sun's presence at different times or seasons. Every part of kingship had cosmic resonance. The Egyptians encapsulated this relationship with a beautiful metaphor. Just as the sun governs the sky, giving light and life, the pharaoh governs the earth, giving law and protection. One is the celestial shepherd of the world, the other the terrestrial shepherd of his people. In fact, in literature, the kings are often referred to as the good shepherd of the people. Long before biblical tradition, this image existed in Egypt. It ties to the idea expressed in the hymn To Ra, where the son is called O Good Shepherd, who protects the weak. Egyptians considered themselves the cattle of Ra, not in a derogatory sense, but as cherished herds under the sun's care. And the pharaoh, as Ra's son, was like the herdsman appointed to tend Ra's flock on earth. To make sure the flock prospered, the shepherd king had to keep the favour of the sun. It's interesting to note that even foreign rulers recognised how central sun worship was to Egyptian identity. The Greco-Roman authors often equated Ra with Zeus or Helios, acknowledging him as Egypt's paramount deity. The Romans were so impressed that in late antiquity, sun worship, Sol Invictus, became almost a state cult in Rome too, influenced possibly by Eastern sun cults, including Egypt's. One Roman emperor, Elagabalus, even tried to centre Roman religion on a sun god, reminiscent of Akhenaten, but that also failed. Ultimately, when Christianity took hold, many sun-related motifs were repurposed. The idea of a single god sun, born at winter solstice, December 25th was originally the feast of Sol Invictus, is a curious parallel often noted. Light and wisdom, truth and justice. Let's dwell for a moment on the more abstract philosophical aspects of Egyptian solar worship. The Egyptians didn't write analytical philosophy the way the Greeks did, but their hymns and proverbs convey a philosophy nonetheless. A way of thinking about life, virtue, and the divine grounded in observations of nature. Light was naturally associated with knowledge and consciousness. They portrayed human souls, the Bia, as birds that needed light to see their way, hence why going out by day was the term for being able to move in the afterlife. To be in the dark, in the duat, was pitiable, whereas to bask in sunlight was joy. As a tomb inscription reads, "May I walk every day in the field of reeds, paradise, with the sun upon my face and breeze in my hair." The sun, illuminating, was a symbol for clarity and understanding. Pharaoh Akhenaten, in one inscription, mused that Aten's light enabled people to discover things, to work with their hands, to navigate. Without it, nothing could be done. In a sense, they intuited what later philosophers did. That light equals reason, chaos equals darkness. Their word Maat, order, truth, is often depicted as a bright ostrich feather or a brilliant concept that Ra rests upon. One New Kingdom text declares, "Ra lives by Maat, and Maat lives by Ra," implying truth and light are codependent. There was also the idea of the sun as an eye, specifically the Eye of Ra. In Egyptian myth, the Eye of Ra is a female aspect of the sun god, often personified by goddesses like Hathor, Sekhmet, or Wadjet. The eye could roam independently of Ra, usually to enact his will. For example, when humanity plotted rebellion against Ra, in the story Destruction of Mankind, Ra sent his eye, in that tale manifesting as the lioness goddess Sekhmet, to punish humanity. Sekhmet's bloodlust nearly exterminated humankind until Ra stopped her by tricking her into drinking beer dyed red as blood, which made her drunk and docile. This myth shows an interesting dimension. The sun's fury, and Sekhmet, can be catastrophic if not checked by mercy. It's as if the Egyptians acknowledged that too much sun, literal or figurative, can be harmful. Therefore they built in the idea of Ra's benevolence and mercy tempering his righteous anger. In any case, the Eye of Ra became an epithet for anything that meets out Ra's will, including Pharaoh, sometimes called the Eye of Ra on earth. Because the sun sees everything, the eye became a symbol of omniscience and vigilance. There's a poetic line in one text: Ra, your rays are in sight of every eye, yet no one can see your face. It captures a mystical idea. God, the sun, can see all with his rays as eyes, but mortals cannot fully see God. We are all illuminated by truth, but we cannot stare at truth head-on without being blinded. This humility in the face of the sun's mystery may have nurtured a spiritual mindset of wonder and piety. Even as they daily interacted with the sun as a predictable force, the Egyptians never lost a sense of awe that this bright disk could be so powerful and yet so regular. Ma'at, order, truth, justice, as mentioned, was intimately linked with the sun. There was a saying that the sun rises and sets on Ma'at. In one hymn we saw, Ra rests upon Ma'at, meaning his entire cycle is anchored by cosmic law. In temples, the daily offerings often included presenting a tiny statue of Ma'at to Ra to reaffirm that harmony. Pharaohs prided themselves on being beloved of Ra for upholding Ma'at in the two lands, Upper and Lower Egypt, and in the famous weighing of the heart scene of the Book of the Dead, where a deceased's heart is weighed against the feather of Ma'at, guess who is often shown presiding over or watching the scales? Ra, in form of Re Horakti, or Osiris, or both. If a heart is lighter than the feather, meaning the person lived truthfully, it was said that the person goes forth in the sunshine among the righteous. If heavy with sin, the heart was devoured, and the soul cast into darkness. Thus, moral truth and sunlight were rewards intertwined. To live in sunlight was a metaphor for being vindicated and welcomed into the company of gods. The sun's reflection in art and architecture. We've already touched on how temples were aligned with celestial events, how pyramids and obelisks carried solar symbolism, how Tumart depicted solar cycles. Let's highlight a few more examples of how deeply the sun was embedded in Egyptian creative expression. Obelisks. These were tall, slender, four-sided pillars, tapering to a pyramidal point, often carved from a single block of granite, and erected in pairs at temple entrances. Every obelisk was like a frozen ray of sunlight. The pyramidion at the top was frequently gilded to catch the sun's first and last light of the day. In Heliopolis, the great temple of Ra, called Per-Ra, House of Ra, had numerous obelisks. One still stands in Cairo, removed to a city square, originally erected by Senusret Vafra almost 4,000 years ago. Its inscriptions praise Ra and mention the king as beloved of Ra. Obelisks were essentially monuments to the sun's glory, and by inscribing their dedications, kings associated themselves with that glory. Later, obelisks were transported to Alexandria, Rome, and elsewhere by foreign conquerors, ironically spreading the beams of Ra's monuments around the world. Solar boats, the discovery of Khufu's ship near the Great Pyramid, a full-sized cedar boat buried in pieces and since reconstructed, was a major find that corroborated the texts speaking of the king travelling with Ra. This boat, likely symbolic, though it could float, was interred next to the pyramid so that in death, Khufu could sail across the sky as companion of the sun. Many pharaohs, especially in Old Kingdom, included model boats in their tomb equipment for the same reason. Temples of millions of years. In New Kingdom Thebes, pharaohs built mortuary temples, often called their mansions of millions of years, where they would be worshipped after death. These temples to the west of the Nile, e.g. Hatshepsut's elegant terraced temple at Deir el-Bahri, or the enormous complex of Amenhotep III, now mostly ruined, or Rameses II's Ramesseum, were aligned roughly east-west toward the Nile, meaning they faced the rising sun over the river, connecting the deceased king's cult to Ra. Each morning, the sun ascending over the eastern cliffs would cast the king's sanctuary in light, almost as if greeting the deified king's statue there. Amarna art. The art style under Akhenaten took a unique form. In depictions of the royal family under the Aten's rays, one often sees the sun disk high above with long rays ending in tiny hands that extend to touch the noses of Akhenaten, Nefertiti, and their children, giving them the Ankh, breath of life. This imagery is deeply tender and familial. The sun is shown intimately nurturing the royal family, who were considered the only ones worthy to directly receive Aten's blessings and then transmit them to the people. Common folk in art are shown standing further back, sometimes raising their hands to the Aten indirectly. The Aten's hands also sometimes symbolically feed the king and queen with the was, power, and sekhem, another word for power, scepters or other symbols. All of this conveyed a new visual language of divine light, intangible rays given tangible form. One can literally see in these reliefs that to Akhenaten, the sun's rays were God reaching down. Winged sun disk. Another ubiquitous symbol in Egyptian art is the winged sun, a sun disk flanked by outstretched falcon or vulture wings, often with cobras attached. This motif often adorns the lintels above temple gateways or at the tops of stelae. It represented Ra, or Horus of the horizon, spreading his wings to protect and encompass everything below. It's like a divine seal of approval and protection over sacred spaces. The accompanying cobras, Uraei, sometimes represent Upper and Lower Egypt, but also double as the flame-spitting eyes of Ra guarding the place. Calendars and the civil day, the Egyptians, being an agricultural society, had to have a keen sense of seasonal changes, and the sun's annual journey was fundamental to that. Their civil calendar was somewhat imperfect. 365 days with no leap year meant it drifted over centuries, but they maintained their religious festivals in alignment with celestial events through observation. One calendar text shows that at the end of every 10-day week they noted the star or sun's position, e.g. they pegged the opening of the year to when Sirius rose at dawn, but they also knew that came when the sun was in a certain part of its cycle, summer solstice time. They had a solar calendar for festivals that might have been corrected via observations even if the civil calendar slid. This interplay means priests were effectively astronomers, in charge of monitoring solstices, equinoxes, star risings, etc., to inform ritual timing. Now, stepping back to the overarching question, why did they praise the sun? We can summarize the major themes that have emerged. The sun as life giver. Without the sun, there was no life. It made crops grow, regulated the Nile's fertility indirectly, kept animals and people alive with warmth and light. The Aten hymn extols this most of all. Everything thrives in sunlight. Praising the sun was giving thanks for life itself. The sun as creator and origin. In their mythology, the sun, as Atum or Ara, was the source of creation, the first god. It was thus the father, mother of all. Honouring the sun was honouring one's ultimate ancestor and the very act of creation that was continually ongoing. The sun as king and ruler of cosmos. The sun ruled the sky like the pharaoh ruled earth. It provided an example of benevolent absolute power, a stable, regular kingship that sustains rather than exploits. Egyptians praised the sun for the same reason subjects praise a good king: loyalty, reverence, hope for continued prosperity under his reign. The sun as judge and vanquisher of evil. Each day the sun triumphed over darkness, the literal darkness and metaphorical evil. It showed that good can overcome evil, light beats dark. People praised the sun's victory, akin to celebrating a hero's triumph. They also looked to the sun as a judge who sees good and bad deeds and will reward or punish appropriately, if not now, then in the afterlife, or through the fortunes of one's family. The sun as symbol of resurrection. This point cannot be stressed enough. The daily rising of the sun was proof to the Egyptians that death is not the end. It gave them a model to understand rebirth. By venerating the sun, they aligned themselves with this cycle, hoping to partake in that endless renewal. To use a poetic image, they saw human life like a shadow that lengthens and fades with the setting sun, old age and death, but just as morning comes and the sun returns, maybe the soul too could rise again. The sun, therefore, was a beacon of hope against the fear of oblivion. The sun as unifier. In a country that stretched over 1,000 kilometres, the sun was one thing everyone saw and shared every day. It unified Upper and Lower Egypt under one canopy of daylight. It connected the farmer in his field to the king in his palace. Both felt the same sun on their skin at midday. In a theological sense, Ra became the unifying god above local gods. So, praising the sun was a way of uniting the people in one common worship. The sun as source of beauty and inspiration. The Egyptians found profound beauty in nature, and the sun's splendour at dawn and dusk, the colours, the drama, must have stirred them deeply. Many hymns are essentially love poems to the sun's beauty. The sun inspired art, song, and a sense of the sublime, that feeling of awe at something greater than oneself. In praising the sun, they gave voice to that sense of wonder. The fear factor. Let's not forget that part of worship is often propitiation, appeasing a power that could harm you. The sun could scorch and cause drought. It could bring sunstroke or blinding glare. There's a Middle Kingdom text, the Admonitions of Ipuwer, where it said the sun has hidden itself and the land is in chaos, a kind of apocalyptic scenario. The Egyptians certainly worried, what if Ra got angry and didn't rise? The myth of Sekhmet slaughtering mankind shows that fear, humanity's survival, depends on Ra's mercy, so praising the sun was also a means to placate this mighty power, to make sure Ra remained friendly. They gave offerings as if feeding the sun, to keep it happy and strong. Spiritual connection. On a more individual level, many Egyptians probably felt a genuine spiritual connection when they stood in sunlight. Some tomb autobiographies have the deceased say, "I spent my life in the light of the sun. I did right by people. I never caused anyone to weep," as if living ethically was akin to living in the sun. A person praying at dawn might feel the light on their face as a direct touch from the divine, a gentle uplifting experience that reinforced their faith. The sun was a tangible god. You couldn't reach out and touch Osiris or Thoth, but you could feel the sun. That immediacy likely made devotion heartfelt. So, with all these facets, from the concrete to the abstract, the sun was praised because it was the total package: natural necessity, cosmic principle, emotional comfort, and spiritual ideal. A day in the life of the sun worship, narrative illustration. Let us imagine an ordinary day in ancient Egypt, say around 1300 BCE, and see how the sun frames it. At sunrise, a peasant family in a village near Thebes rises with the sun. The father steps outside his mud brick house as the eastern sky glows. He crosses his arms on his chest in a gesture of respect and murmurs a prayer to Ra. "Grant us a good day, O Shining One." His little daughter, still rubbing sleep from her eyes, giggles and points. The sun's rim is peeking up red and huge. They watch for a minute. Dew sparkles on the barley fields. Birds are twittering madly in the rushes. The father heads to the field to begin work, knowing the light will be gentle for a few hours before the real heat. He is grateful. Last year his field yielded well, thanks, he believes, to Ra's favour. Meanwhile, in Thebes itself, the grand temple of Karnak is coming to life. The high priest of Amun-Ra has been awake since the dark hours, preparing. In the pre-dawn gloom he led a torchlit procession into the sanctuary, awakening the statue of Amun, the hidden aspect of Ra, with a ritual chant. Now, as the first beam of sun shoots through the temple's eastern gate, it falls precisely upon the altar inside. The priest opens the door of the god's shrine and lets the sunbeam kiss the gold figure of Amun-Ra. He offers a tray of figs and bread and a jug of beer, all consecrated as the first meal for the god. In those moments, the temple's stone columns seem to turn golden. The priest feels the warmth on his face and believes it is the god consuming the offerings through the ray. Outside the temple, townsfolk gather for the daily presentation of Ma'at ceremony. A small effigy of the goddess Ma'at is held up by a lector priest as incense burns. The rays of Ra bless this effigy, symbolizing that Ra accepts the gift of truth and in return will keep balance in Egypt. By late morning, the sun is high and bright. Two scribes squint at their papyrus documents in the open-air courtyard, shifting to find shade under a palm. They dip reeds in ink and tally grain taxes, pausing to wipe sweat. One scribe jokes, "Ra is watching us so close today, he'll know if our accounts are off by a single sack." They chuckle, but both silently acknowledge the truth. Cheating under the sun feels wrong, as if the sun's presence compels honesty. Across the river, on the west bank, it's time for a funeral. A small cortege carries a bier toward the tomb entrance cut in the cliffs. The sun beats down fiercely now, midday. The mourners, hot and thirsty, nonetheless take solace that the sun overhead signals all is right. It's noon, the natural order. The priest conducting the rites points to the blazing orb and says, "As sure as Ra sails in his zenith, so shall the soul of our brother sail with him in the sky." They leave the tomb just as the shade of the Theban mountains begins to lengthen. The deceased is left lying in a shaft of sunlight filtering through the entrance, a symbolic last blessing of Ra upon his mummy. By the time the sun moves and the tomb falls into shadow, the ritual is done and the door sealed. Afternoon gives way to sunset. At Memphis in the north, the pharaoh rides out in a chariot to inspect a new obelisk being erected in honor of Ra. It's almost complete. A towering granite spire engraved with hieroglyphs praising the sun god for granting victory in war and abundance in peace. Pharaoh stands proudly as the sky turns orange. He recites, Ra, Lord of the thrones of the earth, when you set in peace, the world rests in your care. When you rise, the world lives. As long as you live, I shall live, and my people with me. The obelisk's gilded capstone ignites in the low sunlight, blazing like a torch. Trumpets sound, and the obelisk is pulled upright to the cheers of soldiers and citizens. In that golden light, the pharaoh's eyes glint with satisfaction. He feels Ra's approval like a tangible force. In his heart he thinks, my reign will be strong so long as I honour Ra. Finally dusk settles. The sun, now a red sinking ball, touches the western horizon beyond the palm groves. In a small village, an old woman stands at the gate of her house. Her arthritic hands are clasped as she softly sings a traditional evening hymn. Farewell, Ra, until tomorrow. Travel safely through the night, O you who are all, that we may see you again with the morning's light. Grandchildren peek from behind her, sensing a tinge of sadness in grandmother's voice. Perhaps she is. Remembering those who journey with Ra now in the Duat, like her departed husband. Out on the desert edge, the jackals begin to howl as shadows engulf the land. The old woman lights a clay lamp, its flame tiny compared to the departed sun, but comforting nonetheless. In the royal palace, as stars emerge, priests of the sun's entourage burn torches and begin reciting the protective spells against Apophis. They draw a serpent in the dust and stab it. They burn a picture of the snake while shouting imprecations. The royal family in their chambers knows these rituals are being done on their behalf, to ensure the sun rises safely, which means the kingdom remains safe. The princess, a little girl, kneels by her window that faces east, clutching a sun amulet, and prays, "Please come back, Grandfather Ra, please come back." And inevitably, triumphantly, dawn comes again. The cycle continues. Eternal sunshine. Conclusion. The ancient Egyptians praised the sun not out of simple sun-basking delight, but out of a deep, multi-layered understanding that the sun was the linchpin of existence and meaning. In a very real sense, the sun was their portal to the divine, a daily visual assurance that there is order in the heavens, and thus order is possible on earth. The sun's rays touched everything, binding together the dualities of Egyptian life, day-night, life-death, order-chaos, Upper Egypt, Lower Egypt, king people, gods, humans. In the sun's cycle they saw the pattern that all life follows: morning, birth; midday, maturity and power; evening, aging; night, death; and morning again, renewal. This grand cosmic clock offered comfort, that even as individuals die, the collective life and the world's life are renewed. By participating in solar worship, each Egyptian symbolically hitched themselves to Ra's chariot, hoping to partake in his eternity. Emotionally, solar worship was both joyful and solemn. Imagine the red sunrise inspiring hope and gratitude, the fierce noon sun instilling respect and maybe wariness, the gentle sunset evoking reflection and humility. The Egyptians mirrored these moods in their rituals and prayers. At sunrise they sang with jubilation. At noon perhaps they offered silent awe. At sunset maybe wistful thanks and a plea for safe return. Through these daily devotions they maintained an intimate relationship with the cosmos. In their mythology they gave the sun a character as rich and complex as any human or pharaoh. A hero who fights monsters each night, a king who grows old and wise each evening, a child reborn each morning, full of promise. These stories allowed them to process reality, to explain why bad things, night, eclipse, storm, happen. Oh, Apophis is attacking, or the eye of Ra grew wrathful, and to reassure that those bad things are temporary, the gods will defeat the darkness. The sun was the ultimate reliable friend. It had been there yesterday, it is here today, and it will be there tomorrow. In a world of uncertainties, crops could fail, rulers could falter, neighbours could turn foe. The sun was certainty. Thus it anchored their faith in continuity, faith that the Nile will flood again, that the soul will live on, that good prevails over evil. The theology around the sun became incredibly sophisticated. They essentially developed what one might call a solar monotheism atop a polytheism. That is, they still worshipped many gods, but they increasingly saw Ra as the one god behind them all. The sun's light was easily analogized to the emanation of a single creator through many forms, just as sunlight separates into colours in a prism, a concept they might not have articulated scientifically but intuited spiritually. There's a beautiful passage from the New Kingdom that goes, "The gods are Ra's forms. Each day he takes a different form." In other words, all gods are one at the core, and that one is expressed as the sun, the source of light. Philosophically, this is quite advanced. The idea that unity underlies diversity, that one divine light manifests as myriad deities and phenomena. It's a perspective that resonates with later philosophies and even modern physics, where all energy might spring from a singular source. The Egyptians got there through their lived experience of the sun's dominance and generosity. Ultimately, we might say the Egyptians praised the sun because it answered their eternal search for meaning. Humans everywhere ask, where did we come from? Why are we here? What happens when we die? How should we live? The Egyptians found many of their answers in the sun. Where did we come from? From the first sunrise, from the tears of the sun, God's joy, from the light. Why are we here? To bask in Ra's creation, to help maintain Ma'at so the sun continues to rise, and life continues to flourish. What happens when we die? We go into the night like Ra, but like Ra we can be reborn if we have lived in Ma'at. Death is not the end, just a phase of a cycle. How should we live? Like the sun, be just and unwavering, bring light to others, repel darkness, evil, with the light of truth. Rise each day to your tasks and rest when it's time. Care for those in your rays. Like the sun nurtures all creatures without prejudice. These lessons gleaned from the sun gave the Egyptian life purpose and direction. No doubt the Egyptians were practical and could be cynical like any humans. They complained about the heat, they might focus on worldly concerns over spiritual at times, but at core, their culture retained this reverence for the sun's higher symbolism. It's telling that even when new gods emerged or foreign influences came, like the worship of Isis or Osiris's prominence in late period, they still often depicted a sun disk on the headdresses of those gods, or had them assimilate with Ra. The sun's primacy endured until the very end of pagan Egypt, and even beyond. Early Christians in Egypt, for instance, associated Christ with the sun, calling him the Son of Righteousness, and aligned some church orientations to the east. Old habits die hard, especially ones so engraved in nature. As the last temple of Isis at Philae was closed by decree in the 6th century AD and the old religion faded, one can imagine an aged priest of Ra watching the final sunset of his cult. To him, perhaps, it was heartbreaking, but the sun itself still set and rose regardless of human worship. In a sense, the sun transcends any one culture's praise. Yet the Egyptians, for all time, have the distinction of being the civilization that devoted itself most fully to the sun's veneration. They raised stone mountains to it, composed hymns of stunning devotion, and aligned every facet of their world to follow its guiding light. Their entire worldview was, quite literally, illumined by the sun. And so we end where we began, at dawn on the Nile. Picture once more those first golden rays spilling over the desert's edge. The priests on the temple rooftop raise a joyful cry, "Awake, awake, awake, Ra Almighty, who comes each day as a king." The light floods over the sleepy villages and grand monuments alike. In that instant, all of Egypt, from the lowliest labourer to the holiest high priest, from the newborn infant to the pharaoh on his throne, is united in one experience, the warmth and radiance of the sun upon their faces. It is the touch of Ra, the life-giver, the dominion of Aten, the glory of Re Horakti, the rebirth of Khepri, the completion of Atum, all these facets in one brilliant light. In their hearts, the Egyptians feel a profound gratitude, and perhaps even love, for this daily miracle. It is more than devotion. It is a relationship. The sun was their steadfast companion through the ages of a civilization that lasted over 3 millennia. They praised the sun because they saw in it the mirror of the divine, the promise of eternity, and the embodiment of all that is good and necessary. As a later Egyptian poem from Greek times put it, "O Helios, sun, when you rise, the gods sing for joy, the birds flutter from their nests, the hungry are fed, the Nile overflows. All things are under your reign. You are the Lord of time, the Lord of life." Though the language changed through the centuries, the sentiment remained constant. The Egyptians praised the sun because, to them, the sun was life, the sun was order, the sun was justice, the sun was beauty, and the sun was the divine made manifest. Even today, stand in Egypt at dawn amid the ruins at Karnak or Giza, and watch the sun come up. You might catch a glimpse of what they felt, a flutter in the chest at the sheer magnificence of light returning to a dark world, a sense of gentle power and reassurance in those rays caressing the ancient stones. In that moment, you understand at an emotional level why a farmer, a priest, a king in ancient Egypt would incline their head and whisper a prayer of praise to Father Sun. It is the same sun shining now that shone on Khufu, building his pyramid, on Hatshepsut erecting her obelisk, on Akhenaten singing his hymn in Amarna. In connecting with it, we connect across time with those people and their yearning for communion with the source of all light. Thus, the daily drama of the sun, its eternal story of dawn to dusk to dawn, became the eternal story of Egypt. And as long as the sun continues to shine and humans continue to seek meaning in its light, the spirit of Egyptian solar worship lives on. The ancient Egyptians praised the sun because in their wisdom they realized that in praising the sun, they were ultimately praising the mystery of creation and the miracle of their own existence. Each sunrise was a reminder that life triumphs over death, that order can emerge from chaos, and that something out there, call it a god, call it nature, loved the world enough to bring it light every day. The sun, then, was the face of the divine they could see, and so they loved it, they feared it, they exalted it. In their hymns we hear their voices across millennia, inviting us to feel the same reverence. O Ra, supreme power, the earth flourishes when you shine. You rise, we live. You set, we sleep. You are eternity. You are the flame of life. We shall adore your majesty forever. And as the first golden rays of dawn once more strike the Nile's waters and dance on temple walls, one can almost hear those ancient voices whispering through the ages. Amun-Ra, Atem, Aten, Khepri, Horakti, Atum. Different names, one sun. Thank you for rising today. Hail to you, Lord of light,